Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The lead Brink Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1166 of the War News stream and a Sunday night fundraiser stream yet again. And we have very big news tonight of Israel and Iran preparing for war with one another over the Tel Aviv airport attack today. Also, India's closed a major water flow to Pakistan today via the dams. And also, Putin has once again threatened nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And we have big news to cover. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world. And I got to be honest with you all, tonight is another night where just the summary alone is probably going to be taking roughly 10 minutes or so. It was a big day. It was a massive day because we were able to hear of major news happening all around the world as Vladimir Putin in the Russian Federation directly insinuated today that there is the possibility of nuclear armed action against the state of Ukraine as the war continues, and U.S. support is actually beginning to ramp up in support of the state of Ukraine again after the peace negotiation talks failed because of Russian tomfoolery and shenanigans being conducted during the peace negotiation efforts. Meanwhile, we were also able to hear that more diplomats are dropping out like flies from attending the May 9th Victory Day parade, which may be leading to Putin having additional frustrations over the matter. We have also been able to see that the Russian Federation has also suffered a significant gas pipe explosion inside the area of Moscow, setting an entire apartment block on fire and wounding dozens in the process. Meanwhile, a major incident happened at the Ben Gurion airport today in Tel Aviv as a Houthi missile fired from the area of western Yemen landed directly onto the airport of the Ben Gurion airport complex, slamming down into the area, not causing any injuries, but causing some damage. The Israelis have stated that they are out for blood at this point and will be responding to the Yemeni Houthis and the Islamic Republic of Iran directly for the attack on civilian infrastructure such as the Ben Gurion airport. We have also been able to hear that the United States of America has given the green light for the Israelis to conduct this action, while at the same time, Israeli actions are continuing in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip against Hamas forces. Meanwhile, further south and in the area of western Yemen, we were able to hear that the Houthis are vowing more strikes against the state of Israel, as they are saying that international flights should avoid the Ben Gurion airport because they are going to continue to fire missiles into the area. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that the Iranian authorities have arrested 2 officials today at the area of the port, or the Rejai port, responsible for possibly mishandling some Chinese solid rocket propellant, which led to a major explosion at the port about a week ago. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear of a major fire breaking out in the Iranian city of Mashhad, near to the Afghan border, as it appears that there may be a rash of workplace incidents or some sort of explosions that continue to break out throughout the entirety of the Islamic Republic. And this is also coming at the same time as Iran showed off a new rocket today, an intermediate range ballistic missile, and we've also been able to hear that Iran has issued a threat to the United States and Israel today, as another fire broke out inside of southern Tehran today as well during the issuance of that threat. Inside of the area of India and Pakistan, we have been able to hear that India has stopped the flow of water through another major dam, once again shutting off another lifeline of the Indus River, and of course starting to force a direct confrontation between India and Pakistan that the Pakistanis may have to engage in to once again re-secure their water supplies. Firefights along the border did break out in limited form, although it does appear that once again these are remaining entirely border skirmishes. We are still waiting for the high tensions to revolve into an absolute total war between the two sides. As from what we are understanding, the Indian army is still preparing to conduct precise missile strikes and airstrikes throughout the entirety of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Meanwhile, the Indo-Pacific Command of the U.S. Armed Forces have stated that the invasion of Taiwan has a very high likelihood of happening here within the future, and has started to discuss the extinction plans that the People's Republic of China most likely has to be able to conduct a successful invasion of the island country. Meanwhile, North Korea is now going through a massive rearmament program due to the amount of supplies, munitions, and equipment that they have provided to the Russian Federation over the past year, and we have been able to hear that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is stating that this rearmament is happening quite literally because of the amount of weapons that they have given to the Russians. Meanwhile, the People's Republic of China stated that Xi Jinping will be attending the parade even still, as many other diplomats and heads of state have decided to bow out and not attend the May 9th Victory Day parade during this time. Also, we've been able to hear inside the United States of America that the President of the United States is now insisting and providing the ultimatum that we've been looking for the entire time, that the Islamic Republic of Iran must completely dismantle all of its nuclear weapons and peaceful nuclear technological programs, otherwise they will be facing the wrath of the United States of America due to national security concerns. Inside of the state of Ukraine, we've also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have continued to conduct their defensives and offensives in different areas, with the Russian Federation taking an incredibly high amount of losses today on the front line, as the Ukrainian armed forces were able to conduct some very serious major defensive efforts around the areas of Kharkov and the entirety of the southern front. We have a major amount of news, and that's just the big topic points right there. And that took roughly about 8 minutes to cover just the major ticket points of the night, and not even all of the other news that we have in between. It is an absolutely major night again of news, and considering that the world is continuing to pop off in quite literally every single direction, it's really hard for us to not be running an approximately 2-hour-long news segment each and every single night. But we are happy to have a massive y'all here. We already have about 7,000 people here with us live right now, and we are incredibly appreciative that many people continue to choose the Enforcer channel to be your primary source of news. And not only that, it is on a Sunday fundraiser night, where we are fundraising for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit, and we have already been able to hit $1,100 of the $2,500
Hey,
goal.
that's what I'm talking about. Look at that. Yeah.
Man, let's go, baby! And hopefully we'll be able to hit the $2,500 goal incredibly soon. But moving on from that and into the major news of the night, also, by the way, I did see someone ask about this. Someone asked, did you hear about the reopening of Alcatraz? Yes, we did. It's just that that's more of a domestic topic that is not really going to be covered much here on the show, but we did have that reposted on Twitter, that the Alcatraz federal prison, which many of y'all have known about from history, at least here in America, as being a very notorious American prison, is apparently going to be reopened. So a little bit interesting on that one, but anyways, we don't really cover domestic topics like that, but we did hear about it. Nevertheless, it is time for us to get on into the major news of the night, as we were able to hear that the Russian Federation is apparently now moving on into directly threatening Ukraine with nuclear weapons and arms in the future as the conflict continues to transpire. First, we were able to hear a series of statements from Putin today, not only including the nuclear threat, but also including other statements as well, that once again are showing the official statement and rhetoric of the Russian Federation. We were able to hear that Putin has blamed the West again for the state of Ukraine's mere existence for the large part, as the West exploited the cessation of hostilities following the Minsk agreements to rearm Ukraine and prepare for war with Russia. So it appears that once again we are under the grand conspiracy theme in the Russian Federation, that anytime a ceasefire happens, it's only a brief respite for the West to be able to build up weapons and equipment to be able to go to war with Russia at some point in the future. It's a little bit interesting that they're saying that, because if I remember correctly, I think they used the Minsk agreements to do just that when they invaded Ukraine in 2022, but I might be mistaken, it's not like we're historical experts or anything on this here. But beyond that, we also were able to hear that once again the Russian Federation is putting out clear imperial ambitions, as Putin did state today that reconciliation with the Ukrainian part of the Russian people, not with the Ukrainians as a sovereign state, is irreversible, effectively meaning that Putin is now stating that the Ukrainian people themselves are the enemy of Russia and not the Ukrainian state. That actually was a direct statement by Vladimir Putin today, as a matter of fact, which is starting to show that the metrics of the war are becoming a little bit more obvious, at least to some people who have tried to insist that this was not the case for years. Many people have tried to make it out to be that the Russian Federation actually doesn't have a problem with the Ukrainian government. They actually have a problem with the Ukrainian people themselves. They largely have historically viewed the Ukrainians as second and third class citizens throughout most of the history of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union whenever they were under their control, and this is one of the main reasons why Ukraine is so vehement on not becoming a part of the Russian Federation again in the future, because that largely means that a lot of their citizenry are going to be treated once again like second and third class citizens, and a cultural genocide will most likely be conducted where the Russian Federation begins to Russify the Ukrainian population once more and attempt to completely erase their historic and cultural traditions and heritage that they have had for approximately about 1,000 years. As a matter of fact, they've had their cultural heritage longer than the Russian Federation has, because the Russians are an evolution of the Kievan Rus, meaning that the Ukrainians are really the very heart of Eastern European culture for the large part. But nevertheless, moving on from that statement and really moving on to the big ticket item that was in our thumbnail and title tonight, Putin has now insinuated that nuclear weapons are a high likelihood of being used, or a decent possibility of being used in the future, even if there is not an existential threat to the Russian state. This is something that is actually starting to go in the face of developed Russian nuclear doctrine. Even nuclear developments that have occurred over the course of the war do not really justify the use of nuclear weapons in this kind of an instance. But this is what Putin said directly in this clip. We're not going to play the clip because we don't know if there's going to be some copyright issues with it. But what Putin stated was that they wanted to provoke us, to make us slip. There was no need to use nuclear weapons, and I hope there won't be. We have enough forces to bring what we started in 2022 to a logical conclusion with the result Russia needs. Once again, making it fairly clear that they're looking for total war, and also insinuating the fact that if the war doesn't go exactly the way they want it, exactly in their favor, there is actually the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons. This is something that is starting to show that the Russian Federation is once again desperate. Nuclear threats are very seldomly thrown out directly by the office of the President of the Russian Federation. It has happened in the past, but usually when that happens, something has gone pretty bad on some level somewhere. And of course, recently it appears that something went pretty badly, because they finally appear to have run out the patience of the U.S. diplomatic team in the office of the President of the United States, as we have seen the diplomatic negotiation efforts have ceased, and not only that, U.S. support to Ukraine is now increasing with pretty much each passing day. A lot of people have been talking about this issuance of the nuclear insinuation that Putin made in these statements today, and a lot of people are wondering what Putin really means behind it. And a lot of people are actually saying that it's a pretty weak threat. The Russians have cried wolf a million times over the course of this war. This isn't entirely new, but it does reach the radar here on the channel whenever statements like these are made, because the insinuation of using nuclear weapons in an offensive manner against the state of Ukraine, which is what this is largely meaning, is something that is quite dangerous, as a matter of fact. It's a very dangerous precedent to lay out. There's only one country in the world right now that actually has a preemptive strike-first nuclear policy, and that is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Outside of that, Every single country in the world has developed a defensive shoot back last doctrine, meaning that they have to be fired upon with nuclear weapons first, or there has to be some sort of major existential crisis to the very existence of the state for them to be able to use nuclear weapons. And it appears that Putin is starting to slowly erode that, even by his own statements, and is beginning to start to move Russia into a possible strike first nuclear doctrine, or a preemptive nuclear strike doctrine. And a lot of people are also saying that Putin would never use nukes on Ukraine, once again, largely working off of that idea and framework that nuclear weapons in every country but North Korea are supposed to be used entirely defensively, or if there's an existential crisis to the state, which there isn't one for Russia at this point. Other people are saying that Putin wants to use nukes soon, and some are unsure and undecided. But funnily enough, a lot of people are actually appearing to be pretty split on this idea, and it's almost an even split amongst the major three ideas tonight. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think it's a weak threat, or do you think this actually has some sort of teeth behind it this time?
So it looks like 36% of the audience said it sounds like a very weak threat, while 29% said Putin does want to use nukes very soon, and 30% said Putin will never use nukes on Ukraine. And one thing's for certain, his statement that he made today on this video, which we're currently looking at right here, of the idea that he hopes not to use nuclear weapons on Ukraine, that sounded like a very direct threat in my opinion. And of course, he phrased it in a way that made it sound like he had no involvement whatsoever in making the decision to launch nukes at Ukraine, when it turns out that he's the sole one with that power. So that's quite facetious to even say that. And once again, I think that is a veiled threat that Putin is saying right out of his own mouth. So he threatens nukes all the time. Medvedev loves to threaten nukes as well. But the big question is, do you think he is serious? And honestly, I would say that Putin probably does want to use a nuke, but the problem is he has to think about the international backlash, and also he has to think about the fallout potentially going right back into Russia, because that's the way the winds would carry the fallout, is literally right back into Russia, which wouldn't do them any good. But of course, he doesn't care about the civilians, so he might do it anyway, and he might be planning a false flag attack on this parade that could give him some justification to escalate the war dramatically. So it's a lot of things going at once, but generally speaking, I'm actually with the 29%. I think he wants to use them, but there might be things holding him back. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it's a fairly weak threat just due to the fact that they've issued the threat multiple times, and not only that, they did fire an Oreshnik IRBM with the dud warheads into Zaporizhia, and so really at this point, unless if they were to outdo the Oreshnik strike on Zaporizhia, there really is no way to make this out to be an incredibly strong threat anymore, because that seemed to be, at least at the time, the absolute cusp of nuclear escalatory actions that could be conducted by the Russians, and still we're right back to the don't cross the line in the sand or we'll draw another one sort of a talk from the Russians. It is a, of course, considerably concerning thing, considering that there is a implication of the use of nuclear weapons in an offensive manner, but beyond that, I still think that there is going to be a lack of follow-through with this by the Russians, and so I would have to agree with a large majority that I believe it's a fairly weak threat, at least from what I'm able to see right here. I also saw someone say in the chat, and I wanted to speak about this a little bit because it actually is interesting, that French nuclear doctrine technically has a warning shot policy, which is true, actually, but it's still defensive in manner. The French nuclear doctrine...
A nuclear warning shot, you say? Like a warning shot with a nuclear weapon?
Yeah, kind of like a shot across the bow with a strategic nuclear weapon. Yeah, like it's a little bizarre. It actually is, but still, French nuclear doctrine is defensive in nature. French nuclear doctrine doesn't mean let's fire off a warning shot at someone before anything happens with the nuke. It's more so fire off a warning shot with the nuke in a defensive manner, telling them it's about to get a lot worse. That's really how the French nuclear warning shot works. But it's not an offensive. Is not an offensive use of a nuclear weapon in manner. French nuclear doctrine, much like many other Western countries, revolves around some sort of a dire threat to the state that may may make the French state cease to exist. So if there is a situation like that, where France is dealing with an enemy that is far overpowering them in combat power and military power, or the French army is being defeated on the battlefield, and it does appear that the French nation may be taken over, they actually will fire a strategic nuclear weapon, a singular one, as a warning shot, which I don't really know how that would actually work in practice, because most every other country on the planet works on the, oh shit, something's been fired, fire everything back, sort of a policy. So I don't really know how that would work, because I feel like the warning shot would be followed up minutes later by the entire French arsenal firing in response to Russia possibly firing hundreds of nuclear weapons back at them. So it probably wouldn't really work that well in practice, but it technically does exist, but still largely in a defensive manner. A little bit of a wild thing, though. And then also, Matthew, do you know the British have a really interesting system because all of their nuclear missiles are actually submarine-based, from what I remember, and so they have the letter of last resort.
Yeah, I do know about that, actually. I have heard about that.
Yeah, that one's actually a pretty neat one to explain a little bit about British nuclear doctrine to y'all, considering that the nuclear triad here in the West is Britain, France, and the United States as the only nuclear-armed powers that are a part of our Western alliance. The British actually have the letter of last resort, which is to mean that if Britain was wiped out in an absolute attack by an enemy power in terms of nuclear arms and weapons, and there were no commands being given to their submarines underway at sea carrying their nuclear missiles, then the commanders are to open a safe. I believe the commander and the first mate or first officer of the submarines will open up a safe on board that has a personally handwritten letter by the last standing prime minister of the United Kingdom, which will provide the final orders to those submarines on what they are to do. And apparently there is actually an idea that the orders could actually be not to fire their nuclear weapons and instead return back to their British harbor and just not fire their nuclear weapons. But generally we do understand that the orders would generally be to fire off their nuclear weapons as a last shot from the United Kingdom. Nevertheless, those are really the different nuclear doctrines of the UK and France, and everyone knows America's, which is the concept of mutually assured destruction. Tactical nuclear weapons usage on the battlefield is a thing, of course entirely defensive, and once again we do not fire tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield unless they've been fired at us first, or if we're losing significantly on the continent of Europe. Those are the only situations that we will fire off tactical nuclear weapons. But on the strategic nuclear side of things, our doctrine is entirely defensive, and we are only to fire back if fired upon. So if NORAD sees, or the Space Force at this point largely sees nuclear weapons from the Russian Federation being fired over the Arctic Circle, and they're coming on over, and we have about these days, we actually have about 30 minutes to respond to it, not 15 minutes. We will begin to issue the orders for the U.S. to fire everything we have back at the Russian Federation and destroy them in turn. So pretty much our deterrent is if you try and kill us, you might succeed, but there will be no one around to celebrate the victory. That's largely how we structure our nuclear doctrine. And of course, everyone knows about the nuclear football and everything else, the little neat trinkets and little mementos of the U.S. nuclear policy. A pretty interesting thing. But those are largely the three different ways, the three unique ways that each country's nuclear doctrine or strategy largely works. But the Russians largely also, by the way, I forgot to mention this, the Russians largely work on the same mutually assured destruction nuclear doctrine as the U.S. There are some minor variations, however, like, for example, the Russian Air Force doesn't really train their pilots, or historically didn't train their pilots during the times of the Soviet Union, to conduct precise close air support missions, because the idea was that they would start lobbing tactical nuclear weapons pretty much off the bat, so accuracy really didn't matter because the tactical nuclear weapon has such a wide blast radius. As long as it's falling within the general area of the target, it's going to hit it and destroy it. But the Russians actually have an idea that there is a chance of survival during a nuclear conflict, instead of the idea that everyone is just going to get killed, which is really what the U.S. works under. That's why we don't have a lot of public nuclear shelters. The Soviet Union and the modern-day Russian Federation actually have a concept that you can survive a nuclear conflict, and for this reason, the Soviet Union largely constructed a great deal of nuclear bomb shelters under major industrial concerns, and also through a decent area of the highly populated regions of major cities. There also are, in the modern day, other nuclear shelters that the Russian Federation has been creating, but these are above ground semi-permanent structures that most likely would not be able to survive a nuclear blast in most cases, except for the case where they are quite literally so far away that they're really only providing shelter from some flying debris. But nevertheless, that is really the nuclear doctrines of all four countries that would be involved in any kind of a situation where Russia might actually use a nuclear weapon. But beyond that, I have a feeling that the chances are still quite low, and this is an incredibly weak threat overall. But still, a lot of people have been wondering about what's going to go on May 9th, because now there's been a little bit of a rumor circling around that the Russians might attempt a false flag attack on the May 9th Victory Day parade to try and justify some sort of further escalation to the conflict so that way they could keep it running. And a lot of people seem to be believing that there is going to be a decent chance that the Russians might actually structure and attempt a false flag attack on May 9th to provoke further hostilities between the two. Others are saying that the Ukrainians are going to attack it, others are saying that the Russians won't do a false flag, and some are unsure and undecided. But crazily enough on this one, there's more unsure and undecided people than there are people saying that Ukraine will attack the May 9th parade nowadays. But Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so the big question is Russia preparing a false flag attack on their own May 9th Victory Day parade? And it looks like 57% of the audience said yes, Russia will false flag attack, while about 13% said actually Ukraine will actually really attack it, and 12% said no, Russia will not do a false flag attack on their own parade. And honestly, I'll have to admit, I'm a bit worried about this one right here because Zelensky said it today. He said he's worried about provocations on May the 9th. He didn't specifically say it was going to be a false flag on the parade itself, but he did allude to Russian provocations, which could implicate a false flag attack. And with that, Putin not showing up to this whole parade situation, I would say that's making Putin looking very weak. And unless Putin knew that something was going to happen, I really don't see a scenario where he would actually not show up. So he's not the only one not showing up. Several other world leaders are not showing up either. It's Vucic from Serbia, as well as Fico from, which country is he from, by the way? I forgot.
I think Fico is from Slovakia, but I haven't checked his credit score lately to really know.
Oh yeah. He's got a bad FICO score, but apparently he's from Slovakia, and also the Indian defense minister is not showing up either. So I think Xi Jinping is still going to be there, but I'm sure that might change at the last minute. But it's concerning to me right now, and I'll have to say I'm actually with the 55%. I think Russia might do something if Ukraine does not attack. So if Ukraine doesn't come in and actually hit it, it might be the Russians actually hitting it to create a justification for a massive escalation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I do believe that the Russians might end up conducting a false flag attack. It's not entirely out of the picture, because many do have to remember that the Second Chechen War was justified entirely on a false flag attack called the Belsan apartment bombings, where supposedly Chechen terrorists planted bombs at the bottom of 2 apartment buildings, blew them up, and ended up killing about 500 people. Pretty much the Russian version of 9/11. But the crazy thing is that they didn't really do a good job setting it up, and so it ended up becoming, crazily enough, just quite literally an up in the air, quite obvious the false flag attack. It's known pretty publicly these days that the FSB was the one that planted the bombs at the bottoms of these buildings instead of the Chechen terrorists, because it doesn't really make any sense that the Chechens would conduct a terrorist attack on a country they weren't even a part of anymore, because they had already secured their independence. So that part really didn't make a lot of sense. And also some people would be like, what do you mean they had independence? Well, after the first Chechen War, the Chechen Republic was actually an independent state for a while, not really legally recognized by anyone but Russia, because they got beat that badly and they had to admit that they exist. But beyond that, the reason why the Belsan bombings happened is because Putin wanted to forcefully reunite Chechnya with the rest of the Russian Federation, so they created the Belsan bombing incident to create a military justification to go into Chechnya and wipe them out, technically claiming that they were supporting and harboring terrorist forces. That's largely what the Russians did in that kind of an incident. And I have a feeling that that's not far out of the question to say that they would do that again with the state of Ukraine and try and conduct a false flag attack somewhere in Russia during that time, and then state that the state of Ukraine was actually the one to do it, and for that reason, they are going to respond in even far larger form. Possibly even declare a full mobilization as a result of that. Who's to know? Who's to say? But I would say that I'm going to be with the large majority. I do believe that the Russians will possibly try and commit a false flag attack during the May 9th parade, but I do have to say that they're not going to kill Xi Jinping. Absolutely not. Because if they kill Xi Jinping, the Chinese are going to demand that they investigate what actually happened, and then it will mostly be uncovered that it's a false flag attack, and that could end up blowing up in the Russians' faces quite horrifically. So if anyone's going to get killed in a false flag attack, it's going to be a bunch of, at least for the public's concern, or any international nation's concern, will be a bunch of no-name nobodies that would end up getting killed in this kind of an attack, and not a head of state. Absolutely not. That will not be happening. I can promise you all that one. But with that, hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on into a little bit more of what happened in Moscow, because we were able to hear that there was apparently a gas pipe explosion in Moscow, which set an entire apartment block on fire out there.
Jeez, man, that's terrible. Like, I don't know how that happened.
I wonder. I look at that. That thing was cooking.
Нет, газ, походу.
That's a bad fire.
Dang, man, that's a lot. Honestly, man, I couldn't even hear you, man. That truck came out and then you heard, "That's a long fire." And I was like, dang, man. I was like, that thing's loud. Anyways, getting back to the clip. Well,
Man, that's crazy. Must be some arsonists around here or something.
here we can see the apartment building on fire. No one's died in this, actually. There was a decent amount of wounded, but we haven't heard of any casualties coming from this fire so far. But that thing was actually broiling up there, man. I mean, that was a pretty severe little fire.
Yeah, what a place for a gas pipe explosion like that on a higher floor. That's a hell of a location. Seems a little bit specific.
It does kind of seem really specific, you know. I wonder what was up about that. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to hear that the Russians were running out of money, apparently, at least according to the Ukrainian intelligence. Which I do have to put this out there. Budanov isn't always known for putting out the perfectly correct information and intelligence. There's been some things that he may have said in the past that make us question the validity of his statements from time to time. So take this with a grain of salt, but this is what the Ukrainian intelligence did put out today, that Russia is on the brink of an economic crisis due to war spending, which largely that is true, but the actual figures and such things might be a little bit difficult. Next week, the Kremlin plans to raise its budget deficit by 250%, from 12 billion to 42 billion, as expenses far exceed the revenue. So it appears that they may be running into some further financial trouble, at least according to Ukrainian intelligence, but we will just have to wait and see, because you never know. Just give them a little wink and a nod, write a little smiley face on the side of their cup, and see if that makes them a little bit more money in the Russian government. I think they need to do that, Matthew, to generate more tax revenue.
That'll probably help them.
Man, just give them a look. Dude, that's what the Russian government's about to start telling the tax collectors. They're going to say, go house to house, you know. Give them a little look, a little nod. They might put something a little extra on there, like, you know, something like that. Like a couple of extra rubles, which is about equivalent to a slice of toilet paper. But moving on from that and out of the Russian Federation, it is time for us to move on down into the Middle East, because we have had a large amount of news down here in this area of the world. And it's quite an interesting thing, because we were able to hear that, unfortunately, today, the Yemeni Houthis did end up hitting the Ben Gurion airport with a missile, which was fired all the way from Houthi-controlled Yemen and impacted the airport right off in the distance right there. Pretty wild to see. Apparently, according to the Israelis, a THAAD missile system may have missed the incoming Yemeni missile, but I would have to say this is a little bit odd to me. Why in the world are they trying to blame this on us? Like, I just got to say that really quickly. We put our THAADs there to help them out. That's not their crux of air defense. They have the David Sling, the Iron Domes, and they also have the Arrow and the Arrow 2 anti-ballistic missile systems. It's a little bit interesting they're trying to shoulder the blame entirely on the THAAD battery, because the reality is that there had to have been a load of air defense batteries of Israeli kinds that also did not hit the missile, and the Israeli Air Force apparently just didn't even detect or attempt to shoot down the missile either when it went to Ben Gurion. So I would have to say, not really that cool to try and throw blame on the only THAAD battery we have in the entirety of the country, because I'm pretty sure that they have dozens of Patriots, decent amounts of Arrow 2s, David Slings, and Iron Domes, which could have possibly shot down the missile as well. And I don't see them trying to possibly suggest that all of those weapon systems may have missed. Instead, they're throwing all of the blame on the THAAD. So a little bit weird with that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on to the rest of our news, because we were able to hear that the U.S. has now given the Israelis the green light to strike the Houthis themselves, as the Israelis are apparently going to be drawing up their own strike plans to now start hitting the Houthis on their own regard, because, you know, the Houthis are getting a little bit angry out there. You know, they're starting to pop off a lot of the aircraft carriers and the Israelis, and it doesn't really appear that the whole air operation is really stopping them from doing anything. It just just kind of looks like they're putting them in hiding for a little bit, and then they crawl back out of the tunnels and they get back to shooting. We were able to hear that the Houthis are also vowing more strikes against the state of Israel, as the Houthis have stated that we call on all international airlines to cancel all scheduled flights to the enemy's airports to preserve the safety of their aircraft and agents. For some reason, Delta is like the agents of the CIA. I don't know why they put it that way, but they aren't getting hit hard enough, clearly. That's the statement from the Houthis, by the way, and from this guy right here wearing this red beret and this really shitty looking uniform.
Oh, geez. You would think after all this time of the United States absolutely hammering the hell out of Yemen, where all these people are hiding out at, you would think that they would be somewhat in hiding or somewhat reserved. But the fact they're still launching ballistics straight at Israel and also attacking our aircraft carriers, our drones, our fighter jets, etc., it seems like the Houthis are still going strong even after all these attacks on them, which is kind of a bit disappointing.
It is a little disappointing, I'll admit. I gotta say, it's really getting the idea down that if you really want to deal with them, I think you're going to have to deal with them on the ground. I don't really think there's a way to just keep bombing them and they'll eventually give up. I don't think that's ever going to work, because these people, much like Hamas, apparently have some pretty significant tunnel systems that they're able to go into and hide in during the airstrikes, meaning that the damage actually being caused to the Houthis is actually far lower than anyone would believe, even with the amount of ordnance that we've dropped on them so far. I also saw someone say... let's see here. I saw someone say something about, someone said, love how people think intelligence could fail during war, but God forbid you question intelligence errors in history. Well, the thing with that, really quickly to explain, is that intelligence errors in history are usually kind of understood because, it's like 20 years in the future or 70 years in the future. So a lot of the things that were classified during that time are published to the public. Like, for example, Operation Mincemeat largely made the Germans believe and the Italians believe that the Allies were going to be trying to conduct a landing on southern France's coastline, when in reality we were going to land in Sicily. Like, those kinds of things are actually just known. There's a fog of war in the present day because a lot of things are having to remain classified, but as the years go by and more things are unclassified, the true story or the true picture of what was happening on all sides starts to come out into being. It's a little bit old to me, at least in the modern times, that a lot of people try and act like history is entirely fake. Because as a history major, I can promise you all that a lot of historical accounts are absolutely true, because real historians don't work off of a TikTok guy saying, here's what Adolf Hitler didn't want you to know about World War II, and then tells you about a UFO. We work off of anything that is written, actual government reports from the Third Reich, or, for example, actual first-hand accounts from people who were there, either on the American or German side, that actually lived through it. So, that would be the best thing that I could explain, so far, at least in my opinion, because the whole let's question everything in history deal doesn't really stand up when you're a history major, and you know that most of it, if not all of it, can be founded with first-hand accounts of people who were there at the time that actually witnessed it, or there's actual official government reports and writings on it that were declassified at a later date, and then you're able to read them. So a little bit tough one to sell right there. But moving on from that, and on back into the state of Israel, we were also able to hear that apparently the Israelis have been continuing actions inside the West Bank. We were able to see an Israeli convoy being pelted by stones today as they passed through the town in the West Bank of Nablus, which we can see right here. Quite a lot of stones.
What kind of vehicle is that? Like the first one that came running through?
I don't even know, honestly. Like, it kind of looks like an armored up Land Rover, maybe.
It looks like an armored up, like, golf cart or something. Like the wheelbase is so short on it. It's kind of weird looking. Also, why is it wobbling like top heavy like that?
I think it's all the armor, honestly. Like, I think that's why the thing's wobbling. But that thing is
that thing's made to handle that much weight, really.
And also, that's a lot of stones. Also, Matthew, notice that there's a lot of crossfire going on with the stones, because literally everyone's throwing the stones at each other across the street at full speed. So I'm betting you a lot of these people are incidentally stoning themselves while trying to hit the Israeli armored cars.
It looks like it was real effective. They really did something with that.
they really did something, man. They scratched the paint on a lot of these armored cars. Meanwhile, we also were able to hear that apparently the Al-Quds Brigade of Hamas has been trying to plant IEDs to strike at Israeli armored units in the northern area of the Gaza Strip, which is currently under Israeli military occupation once more, which we can see in this clip right here. Once again showing us that there is hostile military action being taken by Hamas, which I do want to remind some people that some people in the chat a couple of days ago tried to insist that Hamas was a political organization that was nonviolent, but we can see them right here making IEDs and planning them to attack Israeli forces. So I've never really seen a political party do that one before, so I doubt that they're a political party. And they are also legally terrorists as declared by the U.S. Department of State. Oh, and really quickly, we're actually going to have to cut that one out. But nevertheless, we were able to see that they were attempting attacks against Israeli forces today, and it does appear that they weren't really that successful, but they still gave it a shot nevertheless. A lot of people have been talking about the continuing rising tensions between the State of Israel and the proxy forces, or really directly the Islamic Republic of Iran itself, as we were able to hear that Israel's airport in Tel Aviv was struck by a Houthi missile today, and a lot of people are wondering, will Israel attack Iran? And it does appear that many people are saying that Israel will retaliate on Iran and will most likely end up directly attacking them as a direct result of the airport attack that happened earlier today. Others are saying that it's a 50-50 chance right now, and others are saying that Israel will just keep talking, and that'll be it. But it doesn't appear that many people are believers of the other ideas. It appears that everyone's pretty much putting their faith and belief behind the idea that Israel is going to retaliate directly against Iran here in the very near future. But Matthew, what are people saying, and what are you thinking about it?
So it looks like 77% said yes, Israel will retaliate on Iran, while 12% said it's a 50-50 chance right now, and 6% said no, Israel will just keep talking. And honestly, I think Israel is going to attack Iran. I think it is going to be some strong retaliation for that, and I think they're going to go for it. So I'm with the 77%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 77% as well. I'm certainly sure that the Israelis are going to be retaliating against Iran directly for this, because the idea that the proxy forces are detached from Iran, or at least the theory, has pretty much greatly diminished over the past few years. And it's quite obvious at this point that both the United States and the State of Israel consider proxy force actions to be direct actions propagated and supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran, like the actions we were seeing today. Meanwhile, moving on into the Islamic Republic of Iran itself, we actually were able to hear that apparently the Iranian government has made some arrests. What are the charges? Blowing up a port? A succulent Iranian port? How dare you, sir? And you, sir, are you ready to receive my limp intermodal? How dare you, sir? Get your hands off my containers. But nevertheless, Iranian authorities have arrested two people during including a government official in connection with the deadly port explosion. We do not know what charges they have attempted to press against them, but we do know that apparently there has not been anything pressed against them that is monetary. It appears to be entirely charges. That was a bad joke right there. Trying to make a joke land, but not really working too well. But beyond that, it does appear that the Iranians are now trying to at least take action for the port explosion that happened a little while ago. Moving on from that, though, we also were able to hear that the Iranians have tested out a brand new bottle rocket today, the Qasem Basur ballistic missile, with a 1,200-kilometer range. The Iranians claim it can defeat the THAAD. I'm doubting that one, because it's being fired from a bottle rocket stand, but, you know, maybe, who knows, we'll have to see. I'm doubting it could beat a THAAD.
Yeah, I'm doubting it.
Yeah, I'm doubting it. There's a lot of dead space. But beyond that, I'm doubting that they'll be able to really go through a THAAD air defense perimeter, because the Patriots have already been shooting down Kinzels and Zircons in the state of Ukraine that the Russian Federation's been firing. So the idea that this thing is going to end up, possibly getting through a THAAD air defense system is going to be a little bit unlikely, at least in my opinion. It's not a hypersonic from what we understand. It's just a normal intermediate range, or really a short range ballistic missile. So the concept of it getting on through any air defense is highly unlikely, in my opinion. But moving on from that and into the capital of the Islamic Republic of Iran, we also were able to hear that the Iranians are continuing to issue a threat, as Iran's defense minister has warned that if attacked by the U.S. or Israel, Iran will strike back whenever and wherever it chooses. And according to that information, it appears that things are starting to heat up once again, as Iranian rhetoric is starting to become far more hostile, not only against the state of Israel, but against the United States of America, which today has made a major policy shift, as we have been able to hear here that the United States of America is now demanding a total dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program, both weapon-wise and peace-wise. It does appear that at this point, the United States of America has completely abandoned diplomatic talks and attempts with the Iranians to regulate their their nuclear developments, and it appears that they're now going to be entirely insisting that they will have to be able to completely dismantle their nuclear weapons program. Otherwise, they'll mostly be facing direct hostile action from the United States of America and the State of Israel combined. At the exact same time, it doesn't appear that things were going that well in Iran anyways, as fires were once again breaking out in Tehran's District 22, which is a fairly dystopian naming system for that.
It's a very big fire out there outside of Tehran.
A pretty massive one for sure. And we also were able to see here the fire burning in District 22 in this clip as well. But still, it does appear that at least at this point, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been dealing with a very interesting rash of fires that have affected the entirety of their republic. And not only that, in the area of Mashhad, we were also able to see another major fire that apparently broke out in the northeastern area of the city. We're not entirely sure what this fire was directly connected to, and geolocation efforts on my end really didn't come up with much, because there wasn't really a large amount of landmarks in this area to be able to ascertain exactly where this was in the city beyond the northeastern area. But it does appear that there's been a large amount of fires that continue to break out throughout the entirety of the Islamic Republic of Iran time and time again. And so here's the clip right here. Man, that's like a train horn or something.
Sounds like it. They're trying to warn the others.
We see the fire continuing to burn. And that's the end of the clip right there. But still, it does appear that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been dealing with an incredibly large amount of fires that have been breaking out throughout their country, and it's starting to once again start to allude to the idea that there may be a little bit more of a direct external involvement that is going on inside the country that is leading to these kinds of fires. But moving on out of the Middle East as a whole, we do have, oh, actually, I thought we were going to have a poll there. I was very ready for that one. But moving on from that and on into the area of Pakistan and India, we were able to hear that India has stopped the flow of water on another major dam to the Republic of Pakistan once more. Once again, cutting off another vital lifeline to the Indus River, which provides about 80 to 90% of the population of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan's population with any kind of drinkable or usable fresh water, which we can see in this clip right here, that the dam's floodgates have been closed and the reservoir is rapidly building up with water, as once again, not a drop of water is making it beyond the floodgates. And we see right down there that the riverbed is quite literally bone dry at this point. But that's the end of the clip right there, and moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also were able to hear that firefights are continuing to break out around the line of contact as reports of exchange fire along the line of contact between Pakistani and Indian border guards has occurred once more. The clashes on the line of contact are ongoing for a consecutive 11 days between the border forces, and that was all the information that we had today. Still showing that the border war is alive and well, although we're not getting a large amount of video and picture evidence of it on a day-to-day basis, but it does appear at this point that India and Pakistan are still on the very verge of moving from a border war to a total war. It's just that we really don't know when that would end up being. And that's really largely the question, if it would even happen at all, or if it's going to be happening soon. As India has ended the flow of water to Pakistan via the Baghlihar Dam, which is the one that we just showed right there, a lot of people are wondering, will Pakistan escalate quickly? And it does appear that a majority of people are saying that Pakistan is going to escalate. Others are saying that there's a 50-50 chance of it, and some are saying that Pakistan Pakistan will just keep talking instead. But, Matthew, it does appear that there is a large majority of people here who are believing one thing primarily and specifically, that the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the Republic of India are going to be getting on into a major conflict here within the near future, and it's only a matter of waiting it out until the major shots of this conflict are being fired. And so what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
So it looks like 74% of the audience said yes, Pakistan is going to escalate, while 10% said it's a 50-50 chance of it, and another 10% said no, Pakistan will just keep talking. And honestly, this is probably one of the most severe things that India could do to Pakistan, which is cutting off the water. And now they've done it yet even another dam, and this time it's the Baglahar Dam. So another big source of water flow to Pakistan being cut off. And that will cause Pakistan to escalate quite quickly because, of course, when you cut off the water, you're potentially going to cause a lot of people to dehydrate, and that's going to be a big humanitarian crisis. So Pakistan will not let it stay like that for long. And once again, people were pointing out in the chat earlier that they can't keep the dam closed forever because, of course, it will start flooding and it will overflow. So they will have to open it eventually, but they will keep it closed apparently as long as they can based on the current information we have. So like I've always said, I don't really agree with that. I think India is in the wrong for trying to cut the water off, but of course, they're doing it nonetheless. But I'm with the 75%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 75%. I do believe that Pakistan is most likely going to end up escalating, because out of the two parties right now, Pakistan is the one that is pretty much forced into escalating against the Republic of India, because the Islamic Republic of Pakistan is dealing with pretty much an absolute loss of any water source throughout most of their country, which is a serious matter. Many people can act like food and water is not an important thing, but of course, people cannot survive without food and water, and also major industrial concerns and also other operations involving agriculture cannot be conducted without a flow of fresh water through any given area. So with that in mind, considering that Pakistan is seeing that about 90% of all of their fresh water is having its supply cut off by India, they are pretty much going to be forced to respond because they will have no choice. Otherwise, Pakistan could quite literally start to die off in mass in the millions as the months would pass if they did nothing in return. So they pretty much are being forced into a situation where they have to confront India, while at the same time India is apparently still preparing to respond to Pakistan in some sort of a major militaristic sense. So in my opinion, I'd say that this is still a recipe for a total war, not just the border war we're currently seeing right now, and that will most likely start to happen, who knows when, possibly weeks or months in the future, but it will inevitably happen. Still, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it's actually time for us to start moving on over into the East Asian news, because we haven't even made it back to Ukraine yet. We started on Ukraine, and then we started to gradually move all the way around the world to East Asia. But before we get on to that East Asian news, I do want to point out that the fundraiser has reached $1,809 raised in support of revived soldiers of Ukraine. Woo! Man, what an amazing thing. What an amazing thing right there. I gotta tell you, absolutely crazy. And we got a $2,500 goal. A $2,500 goal. Absolutely incredible right there. And I gotta say, I believe that we are going to be reaching that tonight. The Lee Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal. And I think that we're going to do absolutely incredibly well. And I believe that we're only a little while away from reaching that fundraiser goal. But nevertheless, Matthew, take it away. What do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
All right, so calling off our top donors of this segment right here, we do have a $150 donation from James Hughes, the largest one of the night, and also a $100 from Hal Rose, as well as a $100 from Old Warrior and Activista, as well as a $60 from LSA Sergeant Figment, and a $50 from Neil Visinant, as well as VLKOLAK, as well as a $50 from Tom S, Axel K once again, and a $50 from Nightmare Before Christmas and Cliff H. And a huge shout out to all those top donors we listed off, and everybody else that threw in a major donation or even small donations, because they all add up to reach up to $1,809 raised. And also, while we're at it, a huge shout out to our anonymous donors as well for throwing in the cash without the name attached, because it is helping Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say a massive thanks to everyone who supported the fundraiser tonight, all of our top donors, and the folks that we weren't able to call out, because we have made it impressively far to the fundraiser goal. We're only about $700 away at this point, which isn't that much, and I think that we're going to easily be able to hit this here incredibly soon, probably just within the next 30 or 40 minutes, hopefully. And if we can't, maybe we'll call up a little general order, possibly. But we'll save that for now. But still, I got to give a massive thanks and congratulations to everyone who is continuing to support these fundraisers, because y'all's support is making a major difference in places like Ukraine, where soldiers' lives are actually being saved and helped out massively because of y'all's support. And I got to give y'all an amazing thanks for that, because once again, if it wasn't for folks like y'all, this channel would have never been able to be possible. And not only that, this channel's support to to American and Western interests around the world through the nonprofits that we support would have never been possible either as well. So a huge thanks to all of y'all once again for that. And of course, please make sure to support the fundraiser if you can. We are getting closer and closer to that fundraiser goal, and very soon we will surpass it, and we'll be able to say that we hit the goal, but not yet, of course. But beyond that, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions here, so that way we have a quick break in between the Middle East segment, the India segment, and the East Asian and Ukraine segment that's going to be coming up here soon, as Nicholas Condor throws in a 250. Holy moly,
Dang,
man, absolutely.
that's a huge one right there. Look at that.
Man, absolutely crazy right there. Truly impressive. And also, Matthew, those were blurred out, by the way. But beyond that, a truly amazing thing right there. Really impressive. And I got to say that is a amazing, incredible thing, because we have reached $2,110 on the fundraiser. A truly amazing and incredible thing, and we absolutely love to see it. And so with that...
That's what I'm talking about. Also, by the way, did you call out Samuel Szymanski's $50 donation, by the way?
No, actually I didn't. A huge shout out to Samuel Szymanski, who threw in E50 as well. Absolutely incredible stuff, because every single person in the Lee Spring Army is doing their part to be able to make this possible and to be able to get us to the fundraiser goal. And so with that, before we get on into the East Asian segment, Matthew, what do we got for some live chat questions? I'm sure we've got some absolutely juicy ones.
Yes, so we do have some juicy live chat questions for everybody right here. And our first one is going to go to Bama FPV, who says, will Poopler false flag attack the parade?
There is a chance that there may be a false flag attack conducted on the parade inside of Moscow, but I would highly doubt that there would be, because Xi Jinping is going to be present along with a foreign contingent from the People's Liberation Army of China. And considering that a false flag attack could possibly lead to a wounding or death of the president of the People's Republic of China, or the death of PLA soldiers, that most likely would not be conducted. Of course, a lot of people would like to think that it's Hollywood, and that would be a high likelihood of happening for those very reasons, but the reality of the matter is that if a Chinese leader is killed, or the People's Liberation Army sees that there are deaths, there will be a massive demand by the People's Republic of China to have Chinese investigators involved in the investigation of what actually happened. And that would start to lead to a high chance that the Russians wouldn't be able to cover up exactly everything, and the Chinese could possibly uncover that it was a Russian false flag attack that ended up killing their leader, which could cause a massive rift between Russia and China, and could actually cause the outbreak of war as a direct result of that. So that probably would be something that's not likely considered. It's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that the Russians could conduct a false flag somewhere, somehow on May 9th, but it's highly unlikely that they actually would be, say, conducting a false flag attack directly on the parade itself. I would say that that is largely unlikely, at least in my opinion at this point, and I could end up being proven wrong, but at least realistically, we wouldn't expect something like that. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the second question of this segment.
Also, by the way, big shout out to Anonymous, who threw in a $200 donation to the fundraiser and helped to bring us up to $2,398 raised. Also, another Anonymous from 110 Swedish kroner, by the way, and huge shout out to that Anonymous person as well. And someone said, is it the hacking group Anonymous? No, it's not actually the hacking group. It's just the Anonymous tag. When somebody doesn't want their name attached to a donation, it goes up as Anonymous. So that's why it appears like that. But anyways, we are now jumping on to our next question here, which goes to David Tablet. He said, did you guys hear that they're going to reopen Alcatraz? I personally did. I heard that right before we jumped on the stream. And I don't know why we're reopening Alcatraz, but, I guess it's an interesting thing. I guess it's really in derelict condition right now. I don't know why we're going to spend so much money to renovate it, but, if they want a new prison, they want Alcatraz, I guess it's good for scare tactic value, I guess you could say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't really get it. I heard about it. I don't get it, because Alcatraz was crumbling by the 1960s. So it's about 60 years after 1960 when the prison was condemned for the large part, and that's why they shut down the prison. And so they're reopening it. It's going to take a lot of money. It really, honestly, you have to level the entire actual level 1 of the actual prison itself. Really, you'd have to level every single building here, because they just aren't really prison worthy at this point. And of course, I might be able to show you all this a little bit. You can see that a lot of the buildings have been abandoned, and some of them quite literally have been gutted. And of course, there are some buildings that still exist, like the main cell house. But at the same time, the saltwater and erosion that's been caused on this building, I believe actually led it to being closed to tours a couple of years back as well, because the building is in that bad of a shape. So to be able to get this thing back into usable condition for a modern day prison, it would take an exorbitant amount of money. Not only that, you pretty much have to level every single building at the prison and rebuild it from the ground up to actually be able to make this usable. I largely would say that it's not a good idea just because of the prohibitive cost reasons, and not only that, there are a lot better ways to run a prison than on an island these days. It's not really like it's not like it's the 1940s we're putting Al Capone away. We have maximum security prisons elsewhere. Like, for example, the most high security prison in the United States is actually the Florence maximum security prison right here in the middle of Colorado. It's surrounded by mountains, so there's really no easy way out. It's also surrounded by desert and mountains, so really not an easy way out. The prisoners are kept in solitary confinement 24 hours a day. They're allowed 1 hour out, but once again, still in solitary confinement. Every single cell is watched. This is probably the best high security prison that we have these days for some of the most dangerous people in the country. And it is wildly different in design, implementation, and use than Alcatraz. I also got to put out another thing, is that the way that prisoners are treated legally has entirely changed, at least over the past 60 years since Alcatraz was closed. Some people might not know this. This is actually a bit of a fun or cool fact about Alcatraz, is that the prison guards were usually equipped, well, it's a decent amount of them, were usually equipped with Tommy guns. With 50-round mags. And the reason why was because if there was ever going to be a prison riot, which usually would happen inside of their chow hall, they would just stand on the other ends of the bars and they would just aim the Tommy guns into the room, and if it got wildly out of control, they would just start greasing everyone in the room. It never happened, but it got close to happening once or twice. But that kind of treatment of prisoners,
Oh, goal! We hit the goal!
Hey!
Hey, let's go! We smashed the goal, baby! Let's go!
Man, absolutely classic. I gotta say, absolutely classic stuff indeed right there. And I gotta say, a massive shout out to everyone who just got us up to the fundraiser goal. That is an absolutely incredible thing. And I gotta give an incredible shout out to each and every one of you for getting us up to $2,553 of the fundraiser goal. A truly impressive thing. Really amazing, actually. And I gotta say that,
Fantastic.
of course, the Least Spring Army never misses a fundraiser goal. We're absolutely proud to see it. And, of course, a huge thanks and a shout out to all of y'all for continuing to support American and Western interests around the globe. But moving on back into the whole high security prison thing, and it probably would end up being cheaper in the long run just to build another high security prison like Florence somewhere than to reopen Alcatraz. So I did hear about it, but in my honest opinion, I think there's a much better use of government funds than to try and reopen a prison that was condemned about 60 years ago because it was too expensive to maintain, because it was almost crumbling and falling apart even back then. So with that, hope that does address it. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention, the Florence High Security Prison has never had an escapee in its entire history, and it's been open, I think, since about the 80s. And also, on top of that, this is where El Chapo currently is right now. He's actually in this prison, along with the Unabomber and Ted Kaczynski was in here until he died. But pretty much most of the highest profile people that y'all have heard being put away in prison, they usually end up getting sent to the Florence maximum security prison. And I think we can actually see it from the road a little bit. Yeah, you can actually see it out there. That's the Florence high security prison.
I tell you what, they think they know what they're doing here at this one, but honestly, man, that looks like our high school. Like, I'm not gonna lie,
I'm not lying. Yeah, it does.
It looks like the same buildings our high school was.
It legitimately does.
We'll overlook that for a minute. But like, speaking of the high school looking like that, there's no other state that knows how to lock people up quite like Alabama. Like Alabama, like they know like how to build their prisons. Like we redirected COVID money in this state of Alabama to build some prisons. Like we're dedicated to building like nice prisons, except for the women's prison right here in Wetumpka, which is absolutely abysmal. For whatever reason, they've never updated it, and it looks horrific. And I've been inside of there, and it looks really bad. It looks really tough. But just Alabama just knows how to do their prisons. I'm telling you.
You know when this prison was built, Matthew?
Probably like 100 years ago or more.
The 1930s. So you're actually pretty close. It was about like 95 years ago or so at this point. But this thing is ancient as shit. And it really shows. Like the whole thing's crumbling. It's a very bad prison. But that's the women's prison that we have here in Alabama. This is for the women. And I don't think there's even any air conditioning in most of this building from what I remember. Is there, Matthew?
Nope.
Yeah, there's no
No,
air.
there's no air conditioning. When you go in there, it's hot as blazes, and it's just it's tough, a tough environment.
So you're in the 110-degree Alabama sun with 100% humidity in an entirely concrete building with no air conditioning. That is honestly, I feel like that would violate the cruel and unusual punishment clause in the Eighth Amendment, if it is the Eighth Amendment, I believe. But pretty wild there. Anyways, Alabama does prisons like no other. What's another big prison here in Alabama? I know that there's y'all want to see death row in Alabama? Like that, we actually know where that
Oh,
is.
death row. That's
Yeah,
Atmore.
yeah, that's in Atmore. Let me see. Let's see. Where is near to like a sewage treatment plant thing? Oh, here we go. The Holman Prison. This is it. And I think death row, like the actual execution chamber, is somewhere in this building. Somewhere, I believe, right down here.
Also, by the way, I just want to make this clear. Some people are saying, "Why were you in a women's prison?" That was back to back during my legal days when I was a paralegal. By the way, I wasn't like showing up to go visit somebody that I knew or something. I was just going there for business. So just to clear that up. But yeah, there's a death row here at Holman that they do these executions. It's actually been on documentaries before, and it's honestly, I'll be straight up honest and transparent. It's honestly quite horrifying, to see the place, and the folks doing the executions are also a little bit interesting as well. But it's a hell of a place. I wouldn't want to go there.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough one. It's just up the road from a big casino, which is right down here. So yeah, you're gambling here, and then up here, the people who lost the gamble with their lives are having that taken out on them. But the state of Alabama, some people said, do they like do firing squad in Alabama? Technically, yeah, we can. I don't really think Matthew, has anyone ever been executed recently by firing squad in Alabama? Because I still think most people have been executed via lethal injection.
I think most times they get the lethal injection. Sometimes I think they've done a asphyxiation, like nitrogen gas chamber or something like that. I don't think they've done a firing squad recently. I think that was in a different state.
Yeah, I think that was in a different state, but Alabama actually did pass a law a couple of years ago where execution, well, if lethal injection is not available, the state may choose a different mode of execution. So firing squad is a possibility here in Alabama, but usually it's lethal injection, like most other states. I think the electric chair is once again an option, and I think some convicts actually might be able to choose their mode of execution, I believe, if I remember correctly, but I'm not entirely sure on that. I don't really focus on the capital punishment side of things much, rather than it is on the books here in Alabama, and it is enforced from time to time. Not a lot, though. Usually executions in Alabama are once every few years, and then there's a massive appeals process that goes on as well before someone actually makes it to the chair, or, well, not really to the chair, but to the lethal injection chamber at this point. So with that, I hope y'all enjoyed looking at that little prison. It's honestly a very small one, really. Like, it's actually quite small, even compared to Tutwiler. But beyond that, no state does prisons better than Alabama. Kind of like how the Statue of Liberty has that little plaque under it that says "Bring me your tired, bring me your poor." Alabama has "Bring me your guilty, you're convicted." It's like a little motto here on our state, because we bring them in, we bring them all in.
I thought that Georgia was the penal colony, but it turns out that it shifted right over to Alabama.
Man, Georgia said, we ain't having that. And then they just moved it right over west a little bit. And then there's also a federal prison here in Maxwell Air Force Base, right up here. Here's the federal prison camp. So this is the federal prison in Montgomery, Alabama.
Interesting. I didn't know they had that on the base. Is that for the military or is that for civilians?
That's actually for civilians. It's just like, it's kind of like borrowed property by the federal government on the base. But that is the low security federal prison here in the state of Alabama, I believe.
Interesting. Right on the base. If I was the military, I wouldn't want that there, honestly. But I guess it works.
Man, I guess it works, man, because if you get out of there, I mean, you're wandering around in an orange jumper, I believe, through the middle of a base. Like, military police are going to be like, get him! Bro, there's really no way out. And then also the Gun Island Chute, which is kind of the Alabama River, is right over here. So, I guess there really isn't an easy way to escape that prison. But it is a low-security prison, by the way, so it's not like the most dangerous people come here. It's honestly not that bad. But anyways, those are a couple of prisons here in the state of Alabama. I just still don't get the idea of reopening Alcatraz, though. If it seems to me to be a very unwise decision funding-wise. I just don't really get it. And also on top of that, everything has to be boated in, so it's not really easy to move stuff here to Alcatraz unless you're going to helicopter it in or boat it in, and that kind of will get a little expensive after a time, keeping that going. And also the prison staff can't get on and off the island easily, so it's not really like they can have a family or a family life that much, because back in the day, pretty much all the prison guards and the warden usually lived somewhere on the island for extended durations of time, and then they would get on the tender from time to time and then travel to shore to the actual city of San Francisco. So I don't know, that it doesn't really seem like that great of an idea to me. But you know, it's going to happen, so it is what it is, I suppose. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And we are on to the final question of the night before we get on into the remainder of the news.
All right, the last question of the segment goes to Uncle Sam, who says, did India just make their dams into a military target by cutting off the water?
Yes, they would be military targets. The Pakistanis wouldn't hit them, though, because hitting them could cause massive issues like major floods or floodwaters flying down these rivers, which could end up causing significant damage and killing tens of thousands of Indians and Pakistanis alike. So they most likely would not hit them directly, but they will be considered strategic military targets to capture and control intact. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know at the moment. But moving on out of this question segment and on into the remainder of the news, moving on into Taiwan, we were able to hear that the Indo-Pacific Command has stated that the risk of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is high. The U.S. command is considering two options for Beijing's aggression against the island: a blockade, which we've spoken about on this channel before, or a potential invasion through the strait with an amphibious operation to land troops and equipment, which is still years away. The U.S. is particularly concerned about China's capabilities, including its ever-expanding arsenal of missiles designed to effectively block U.S. troops in critical areas of the Indo-Pacific region. Once again, letting us know that this is still in the works in the background and it's cooking. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that Xi Jinping will be attending the May 9th Victory Day Parade, which is still being expected at this point, although there might be a last-minute reversal to that at some point in the future. We have also been able to hear inside the Democratic People's Republic of Korea that Kim Jong-un has stated that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is carrying out a mass rearmament by producing new equipment. And some of the old equipment was, quote-unquote, sold to Russia, or more so, they sold the equipment and then they figured out that they're running out, so now they're producing new equipment. That's really what that means, because that's how they've done it. They started the rearmament just about 2 weeks ago, from what I was able to research, or at least a large military rearmaments through the factories. So that means they've been selling off equipment with really no plan to replace it until they started running low, and now they're going to be producing new equipment. We can also see one of those new North Korean main battle tanks that are highly dubious in what they really are, because they look like they're just kind of like a modified or modernized looking older main battle tank, but crazily enough, it apparently is some kind of an indigenous design. We can also see him trying to see if it's made of cake or not. We can also see in this next clip here that he's looking at the main guns, which you can obviously tell these aren't new guns. These are old guns. Look, there's rust on them, Matthew. These aren't brand new. These are old.
These are all rusties. They're trying to paint up like they're brand new. And look, he said, look, if you'll just paint them a little bit better with spray paint, you might be able to make it look better.
Dude, he's saying, can I eat it? It's like, no, it's like, you can't eat that one. And also in this last picture here, we can see them looking at what is quite clearly old road wheels of main battle tanks.
Now, this is a job right here that Kim might be good at, because these are round road wheels, like the round donuts he likes to eat, so he might be able to make this work.
Dude, he might actually eat one of these. They need to keep an eye on him here. But still, look at this, y'all. There's rust on these. It's not like they're brand new, like they're churning these out of the factory. It's quite literally they took apart some tanks and some SPG's main guns, even maybe possibly some main battle tank main guns, and then laid them on the floor. On logs, mind you. On freaking logs, dude. They cut down some trees to prop these up off the floor. That's how bad off they are. They can't even create proper stands for these things. They're literally using logs. Like from the woods.
It's awful. It's really awful. But I got to take a moment to say, I will still say that leather bomber jacket that Kim's got, that is a fresh jacket right there. Like that actually does go hard. Like I kind of want that fresh jacket.
Man, it kind of does go. Also, man, you know something else I just noticed on these supposedly new like MLRSs that they have right here is they all show clear signs of wear. Like the road wheels don't look fresh. There's rust on that one. The mud flaps are clearly worn. Like this thing has been in all of these have been in service for a while, and they rolled them into an assembly hall to make it look like they're building them new.
Yeah, yeah. You know how those like agriculture like tractor dealerships will do? They'll get out like the spray can of like freshener, like oil stuff that makes paint look new, and they go spray the whole tractor so it glows and really like glosses in the sunlight, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel like they did something similar to these vehicles.
I think they did, honestly, because they don't look that good. Honestly, man, like the best way I can explain it, it looks like that Norfolk Southern locomotive, Matthew, that we see on that track survey system that is like brand new cleaned, but you can tell that it's been in service for a good bit, but it's still like clean. This is what this looks like.
It really does. It looks like this. It looks like it's a photo like op type deal.
Man, it's all about that facade. Also, I like how they have just these empty racks out here. I guess they put them out there so that way people could say, hey, nice rack, and not even care about the weapons that should be put on it anyways. But anyways, moving on from that, and on out of that news in North Korea, it is time for us to finally get on into Ukraine and talk about the frontline news there. We were able to see in the area of Kursk that the 103rd Brigade was hitting some Russian equipment throughout the entirety of the front. We will have to mute the audio, but still, it is quite an interesting watch. We see them slamming the Russian forces here. Look at them go.
They're really getting them today. Also, someone said, "Will y'all be live streaming the parade?" I'm not sure what I'm not sure what time the parade's actually going to be happening in our time. I think it might be like in the early morning hours or something.
Oh no, we're not. We're probably not going to be streaming the parade. We never really have, and I don't think we will this time. If something big happens during the parade, we will run a breaking news live stream. But if it's just the parade, it's just the parade. And honestly, it's the same every year. They have the infantry column, the armored column, and then they have the air column, and that's about it. So if that is what it actually turns into, there won't really be that much to see, at least in my opinion. But moving on from that and down into our location unknowns, we were able to see that the U.S. is sending some more Patriot missile systems to the state of Ukraine. As a U.S.-based Patriot air defense system previously stationed in Israel. So I saw someone earlier say that the Israelis were giving a Patriot to Ukraine. Oh, absolutely not. It's an American Patriot that we're moving out of Israel. It's being refurbished and will be sent to Ukraine by the summer, meaning that America is providing Ukraine with another Patriot, which we promised we never would, according to U.S. officials. Discussions are also underway for Germany or Greece to provide another Patriot as well. So it looks like we're starting to line up the Ukrainians with more air defense systems again. Moving on from that, we also got to see some Ukrainian training being conducted by the 2nd Infantry Battalion of the International Legion, with the CZ Bren 2 taking the foreground in the first picture. It goes hard. We can also see them doing some drone training as well, and also trying to shoot down the drone with small arms fire. Pretty cool overall. I like this kind of training, and the pics from the training always goes hard. Really impressive stuff. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from those pictures and on into the Russian casualty report, as we were able to hear that the losses were quite high, but no bombcats!
Oh, no bombcats on a Sunday. That's awful.
Man, absolutely pitiful, absolutely sad. But Miss DC, keeper of the records, did give us a breakdown of things that we were able to hear of so far. 2 aircraft is Su-30 shot down by a Ben Gurion naval drone, and 1 not yet confirmed by Ukraine. The Armed Forces of Ukraine included in the total some adjustments to total enemy losses. Plus 2 tanks, plus 10 AFVs, plus 41 artillery, plus 1 anti-aircraft, plus 33 drones, minus 1 cruise missile, and plus 9 vehicles. So it appears that the Ministry of Defense has done some house cleaning on the numbers. But nevertheless, here are the numbers for the day on what they have lost so far. 1,340 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 24 APCs, 129 supply trucks, 11 main battle tanks, 52 artillery pieces, 163 drones, 1 MLRS, 2 aircraft, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. All in all, it's actually been a pretty impressive day so far from what we can tell, and it does appear that the Ukrainians have been conducting some pretty successful defensives out there on the front lines. I'm not gonna lie, Matthew, I'm just gonna have to break here from the news really quickly and say this because I'll feel a lot better. I'm starving to death because of how our schedule was right before the show started, where we really didn't get to eat. I'm starving right now. I don't know about you.
I'm a little bit hungry. I'll be honest with you. I'm a little bit fiending. You know what I mean? I'm a little bit hungry for some nice hamburger.
Man, I'm telling you, man, I'm absolutely starving over here. Meanwhile, we did get to see that a substation did catch on fire in the Vluki region, the Vluki area of Belgorod. And moving on further down the line, we also were able to hear of some significant battle action being conducted by the Ukrainians today, as we were able to see FPV drones hitting the Russians in the area of the Kremena Forest, which we can see in this clip right here of the Signum Mail unit right here. This unit flies up to the Russians and asks, "What kind of shopper guy?" And then it hits them.
What color is your Bugatti? My color is invisible on my Bugatti. You can't even see it, but it's right there. Look. Look, an old Soviet Bugatti right here in the old Soviet forest. Oh, look, an old Soviet entrance to an old Soviet mine shaft.
Man,
I forgot the last part, man. I was really just stalling down on that last one.
Flint and steel, chicken jockey. Dude, it's a mine shaft. Get it? Ah, it's like Minecraft. Ah!
I tell you, you missed it. They spotted a Motorola. Oh, they spotted a little Russian too.
Man, it looks like they were putting in work out there today. But we were able to see them putting out their outro right there. And, of course, very interesting to see. Good to know the Ukrainians were continuing to hit the Russians in the area of the Kremena Forest. Meanwhile, moving further on down the line, we also were able to see inside the city of Pokrovsk that the Ukrainian offensives were doing quite well indeed, as they were hitting Russian position. Oh, apparently a little too spicy there, folks. We're going to be moving on from that one and into our next clip where we were able to see Ukrainian drones hitting the Russian forces. And also, Matthew, I've done an audit on that clip that we were talking about earlier. We're all good. It wasn't showing anything that we were thinking it was showing. It was something else. But we can see the drone flying on in. Yeah, it was actually showing the guy just prepping the fuse. It wasn't showing anything that would be an issue. So we were all good to go. But we were able to see them hitting the Kamaz, and we were also able to see them targeting a Buhanka as well.
Ah, yes. Charlie Chaplin's looking down upon this with disgust. Oh, yes.
Holy moly, Hal Rose just threw in a 333. Whoop!
Whoa.
Man, I'm telling you. Holy moly.
This thing's up to $3,200 now.
Man, that is absolutely crazy. Goated with the sauce.
Man, that's crazy.
Whoa. Look at that fundraiser.
I mean, call it a fundraiser and a half, but it's really going to the moon.
I mean, he might not be the next Jeff Bezos, but whoa, look at that support. I guess you could call that a full house. Oh!
I mean, yeah, he's a billionaire, but I guess you could say he likes to be a spaceman. That was terrible.
I mean, he's a billionaire, but he had to get that kind of a wife. Whoa, look at that. Like, I haven't really, like, I have questions about that whole thing going on right there. But anyways, we'll just pass over those, and we'll move on to this.
I like to get my packages on time.
I guess you could say that she got lip filler next day delivery. Oh.
That's a good one.
We call it. We call it around here Lipo Prime.
Prime 1 day delivery on the truck. Oh.
But we see this Russian surrendering right here. He's going, please, no, not me. And he's surrendering, so they're gonna let him slide.
If only this guy had used Amazon Live Chat, he might have been better off.
Maybe if he had gotten a subscription to Amazon Prime, maybe he could have gotten next day delivery. Someone said you sound like Santa. He sounds like when he laughs in such a weird way. But honestly, it still is not grating as Tucker Carlson's laugh. Tucker Carlson's laugh is rough. Hit it, Matthew.
Wait a minute, hold on. I got to get in the mode. Say it again. Who was it?
Tucker Carlson.
Damn, like the Jeff Bezos one's really gotten stuck in my head. Like I can't even visualize it. Why does this guy look like the young Sean Strickland, like the UFC fighter or something?
Good question. I don't know. Looks a little nervous, though.
I don't think his pants are the right length.
Whoa, look at those pants. I mean, those might not be in regs. That might not be in Army Regulation 160-7. Whoa. I don't even know if that's the right one. Let me know in the chat, folks, if that is the right Army regulation about dress code and everything. Let me know. But anyways. see him here continue to chit-chat.
Some people say this guy's spilling the beans.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
I had to think about it for a good solid minute though to get that one like really going.
Bro, you really had to like boot that. Oh, it's actually, I got the numbers right, but it was all in the wrong order. It's Army Regulation 670-1. Sorry, everyone, I did get that one entirely wrong. But moving on from that and down towards Kurakove, we also got to see the Russians getting hit. And I also love that you can tell who the veterans were, man, because they had that shit on dial-up right there when I said, hey, what regulation is that? Like 5 people put it in all at the same time. The exact citation and everything. I like to see that, though. I appreciate that. But we also were able to see these Russians in this dugout getting hit a little. We see this Russian here. He's pulling out the stick. And he's aiming it at the drone like a rifle for some reason. Didn't really get that one.
Yeah, it's really dumb to do that. Like, you probably shouldn't make, gun symbols at the drone that's trying to give you a little bit of a break.
Bro, this guy thought he was back on the playground as like a 10-year-old whipping out the gun stick. Like, it's like, that doesn't work in war, man. Bro,
I mean, call him a trooper, but it's not like he's spinning the block or anything.
I gotta tell you, I mean, he sits there, he's thinking on the playground, but this is where the big boys play. You gotta get ready for it, like, man, I'm telling you, when they pulled out that stick, they pulled it out. But moving on from that and on to Makarivka, we also get to see the Rush. Oh, apparently a little too spicy. Sorry, folks. I have a bad eye for that stuff these days. Like, if I see a clip and it is passing, it's passing. And then they label it that it's not good later. And I'm like, what the hell? What the hell's going on? And so, Anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see the Rush. Oh, okay. That one's a little too spicy, too. I guess.
Oh, jeez, man. You're doing a speed run tonight.
Man, honestly, man, I kind of got through the news a little quick because apparently everything that I got for the Ukraine war was a little too spicy, but you know what I like to say? I like it a little spicy. Oh, but anyways, moving on from that,
I really love that one. Have you seen the one where Jeff Bezos is like standing in front of David Blaine like the magician? And David Blaine does crazy stuff, so he picked up like a wine glass and started chewing the glass like off the chewing.
And
he
just started laughing at it. Yeah.
And like Jeff Bezos said something like, "You might want to bring safety glasses next time." Oh. And it's like everybody laughed at that. It's like, come on, bro. Y'all know that wasn't funny.
Honestly, man, like I don't even know how you would make a good joke about someone eating glass. Like they're like, what punchline is there to that? It's like, how in the world can you even try and make a joke to that? You're just setting yourself up to fail, really. Like I couldn't even think of one.
Honestly, Bezos would have been a real one if he just had like pure disgust on his face and kind of like slowly walked away, like in a comedic sense. I'd have been like, respect.
Man, honestly, man, you know what I think he should do? I think he should go grab, like, some forks and knives at, like, an official presidential dinner and, like, balance them together and then beg people to pay attention to it. I think, honestly, that would be better.
That probably would be better. Or he could simply get a bunch of Amazon workers to gather around and tell them to laugh on demand, and that could fix the problem.
Dude, honestly, man, I think it'd be better. Like, honestly, man, I think this is how Bezos gets his laughs. He goes into an Amazon warehouse, and he's like, they have to please the Bezos! And then, like, all the Amazon workers, like, gather up in a circle, and they, like, start running in opposite directions, like, running headlong into each other at full speed.
Oh.
Like, he probably gets kicks out of something like that, maybe.
And also, by the way, I saw, like, I'm not trying to bash Jeff Bezos, by the way, like, I have nothing against him, but one thing that was a bit cringy, as Cody Fritz pointed it out, I saw yesterday that Bezos was talking to all the people that rode his Blue Origin rocket to orbit and back, and William Shatner was on board, who played Star Trek. Captain Kirk. I forgot his name for some reason, but he came back out of the capsule, William Shatner did, and started talking to Bezos right outside the capsule and tried to have like a heartfelt moment where he's like, I just really understand what it's like to be a human now. And Jeff wasn't paying any attention at all and was sitting there like being handed a wine bottle and spraying the wine bottle around in people's faces while William Shatner's trying to talk about his experience in space. And then Shatner's like, oh, this guy's like not even listening. Like, hell, I'm not even gonna bother. So he's like wandered off and just sort of stared at the ground. It was like really cringy, actually.
Man, Shatner's an interesting guy. I don't know if you've seen a lot of them, but sometimes he's very nice to people, sometimes he's not. And I'm like, man, catch him on a bad day.
He's about to go off on Jeff Bezos. I could tell he's like wanting to say something, but he didn't.
Man, honestly, also some folks, you just got to say, folks, every time we make fun of someone, it's not like politically motivated. There's just like honestly, there's a lot of people up there that get up to that kind of like an income bracket that get really weird. Like, I don't think anyone can even deny that. I mean, like, who the hell's going to look at Mark Zuckerberg and go, oh yeah, he's a normal guy. I mean, even now, like, it's like he
No, he's
comes,
normal now. He got the new update.
dude, he got the Chad Bro update recently, but he's still weird because, like, you know that he wasn't like that his whole life. He was the lizard man. Like, it's like everyone knew that not Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg was the lizard man. Everybody knew that because he was like not even really human acting, and he didn't even look human most of his life. So then he gets slightly tan, lets his hair kind of like do the curly thing, and then he also builds up a little bit of muscle. And then he completely changes his personality. Like, I don't trust that, folks, because, like, the whole time I ever grew up knowing him, he was like a robot, and now he just completely changes into a normal person overnight. It's like that's some sort of, like, a marketing shtick or something. I just don't even believe that. And I still find him to be weird, you know? Like, I'm just gonna be entirely honest. And I find Bezos to be weird, and I find Elon to be weird. Like, they're all weird, no matter, like, what a political affiliation they have. Like, they're all a little too eccentric for my taste. You know, I liked it back in the day, Matthew, when, like, the wealthy billionaire people were like these, like, they were like the stereotypical, like, penny pinching asshole kind of people. They were like, why are you going to call on my phone? You're spending up money on my landline. Go outside, you know, and then like they would do that instead.
Oh.
It's like, I could get that, like, John Paul Getty, you know, like,
They're still like that, man. They just don't do it in public anymore. They've learned that for public image and PR, don't do that in public because it looks really bad to the public. So they just do it in private now. But no, like a lot of CEOs are still assholes, man. Like I'm sure Bezos has had his moments of being an asshole. I'm sure Steve Jobs certainly had his moments of being an asshole. He was like a notorious asshole. But no, they're pretty rough behind the scenes. It's just they try to hide it in the public so they don't like ruin their whole public image.
but I don't like that fakeness, dude, because back then they didn't give a damn about what people thought about them in public because it didn't really matter, you know, like in reality it actually doesn't. And no one really cared back then. So they would just be like the stereotypical kind of like penny pinching people. He'd be like, hey, you know, like I could see that, you know, it's like they got to the top, they got to be cutthroat. It's like it makes a good bit of sense. But nowadays they try and come out and like synergize with the community and shit, like they're a corporation themselves. And it's like that just doesn't come off as real to me, like ever. It does not. Because a lot of those people could not care about talking to anyone that does not have hundreds of billions of dollars behind them. Like if there's not a business deal they're talking about, they don't want to talk to you, and then they pretend like they want to, and it comes off as really fake, and you can tell. You know, and it's like, and also, someone said Elon has a reason to be a bit strange at time. Really, nobody does. Like in my opinion, like nobody, especially at that level, does. It's like, you know, you're presenting like a whole company and everything. Why do you got to be weird on top of it? It's kind of like how the guy at Kellogg, you know, the guy who originally created Kellogg's cereal, had like all those weird beliefs. Like I don't know if y'all know about that guy. But man, you know who I'm talking about, right, Matthew? The Kellogg cereal founder guy who owned and ran the company and was like the
Wasn't
CEO.
that the guy that made a Frosted Flakes because he was trying to stop some particular activity or something like that?
Yeah, because he said that exciting foods make you like sexually more active, so let's make the food bland to counteract. It's like, what the hell kind of theories are these? It's like his whole company was built up on that weird theory, and it's like that's just weird. Like that kind of eccentricism sort of a deal. I don't really get behind that too much because it's like, why you got to be weird? It's like, why? It's just be normal, you know? Like
I don't think it's a choice, man. I don't think they're choosing. I think it's just their personality. It's just the way they kind of are.
I mean,
And
maybe.
that's kind of like a prerequisite. I think if you have a personality like that, I think you're like predestined to be like a tech bro. I think because that seems to be like the stereotypical tech bro.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like maybe I don't know, man. It's just kind of a little weird to me. Also, so a lot of people making weird comments about cereal now in the comments. But also, the reason why I've been filibustering like this is I hate to tell you all this, folks, but we actually don't have a speech from Zelensky tonight. He was traveling today, so he wasn't able to make one. So we are pretty much moving at this point already into the second question segment of the stream, where we really just get to talk and go ham with you all already. And we've kind of already been doing that with the whole billionaire talk. But beyond that, Matthew, I understand that we've had a couple of more top donors in between the last segment and this one because we've gotten up to $3,242 raised on this fundraiser so far, which is an absolutely impressive thing. And Matthew, what are our top donors so far in between the last segment and this one?
All right. So our top donors, since the last time we called them off, is we did have that 333 from Hal Rose that came in as anonymous. And a huge shout out to Hal for the largest one of the night, actually. And also a huge shout out to Peter Fucci, who puts in a 100, as well as Greg Carrier, who also put in a 100, along with Monty J, who put in a 50. And huge shout out to all four of y'all for the generosity toward the fundraiser. And also a big shout out as well to Heather Fitzgibbon, who put one in as well, but it showed up as anonymous. And several people were saying they put in their donations and they showed up without their name. And apparently YouTube either has a glitch or they're making it hard to find the button that unchecks the anonymous option. So if you threw one in and you want your credit, by the way, we're not going to let you just get robbed of your credit. Let me know in the live chat and I will shout you out. Because I don't know why it's doing that. And of course, we want y'all to get your credit because you did donate. And while you didn't necessarily do it for credit, you do deserve the credit because, of course, it's totally optional to donate. And we do appreciate it very much because we've had successful fundraisers every single Sunday. And it's only thanks to y'all it happens. So we appreciate that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to completely agree. The fundraisers rest entirely on the Lee Spring Army's shoulders, and the Lee Spring Army continues to represent itself every single weekend, supporting American Western interests around the globe. And I got to give y'all a massive thanks and a huge shout out for that because y'all continuously show that the Lee Spring Army will always continue to be around and it will never truly die, and it will always be a force of good in the world in its own way, shape, and form. And so a huge congratulations to y'all once again for raising that massive amount, both the folks we were able to call out and the folks we weren't able to call out. And also, I wanted to move us on into something else really quickly that was a little bit interesting about some folks. I saw someone, I see some people trying to explain why Elon gets a pass and other people don't. I really want to say this really quickly because this is something that that's a little bit interesting to me, is that people act like because you may have something like Asperger's syndrome or something like that, you get a check to really just be weird. And like the thing is that it generally is kind of understood behind the scenes that I'm kind of on the spectrum. Like that's why I'm like obsessed about so many things and I can just belt stuff off about anything, is that I'm kind of a little wired that way too. But generally on air, beyond, just being like this absolute nerd, I don't really come off as like just being weird. Like I'm not trying to like balance forks in my finger and stuff at a dinner because, I was raised where I get my ass beat if I did that because that's incredibly rude to do at a formal dinner. So, like I just don't do stuff like that because I have self-control. And I really don't like it when people who are like that get like a pass to just do stupid stuff because, like they might be on the spectrum, because it's like, well, a decent amount of people are, and you don't see us acting like, lunatics, like we don't have any social skills, because, we do. So it's like, that's something that I don't really like that much because like, it's kind of something that, I know that I kind of deal with a good bit on my own, like.
Well, I don't think you've seen like a real case of Asperger's, because I actually knew a guy in high school that really had it really, really strongly. And it was very obvious that he had it. And, I obviously always felt bad for the guy. Like he obviously operated just fine, but you could tell like there was moments there was like, oh, that's a bit like off the wall and stuff like that. But it was, in my opinion, it was more severe than what Elon's got. And honestly, I'm like, you've never been diagnosed with anything, so I don't know if it's even true or not. I think you're just saying that because you think it, but I don't think you've seen like a real case of Asperger's. Like Asperger's can get pretty severe.
Man, then what the hell was everyone talking about the whole time I was growing up? Everyone's like, man, he's got like a touch of it. It's like he's
that's just something people say these days. Like people just say anything nowadays. Like everybody wants to say, "Oh, I've got like anxiety or I've got depression or something," and they really don't have any clue what it is.
But I'm not one of those people who make it my identity. Like I honestly could care less, and I honestly think that diagnoses like that only give people a crutch. But at the same time, though, like my point is that just because someone is like considered to be, slightly eccentric, which I'm sure that many people would consider me to be eccentric, it just doesn't really give you a pass to like just have no social skills. Like there are things that you just don't do, like, like act like a clown at a formal dinner or a cabinet meeting or something like that. Like those are things that you just don't do. There's really no pass for that. And he kind of gets a pass. Like another thing that like I don't get, it's like, are we gonna say because the guy has Asperger's syndrome, he can be like a deadbeat dad to like 20 kids? Like is that gonna be your justification for that too? Because it's like I don't really care if the guy's got Asperger's or not. Having like 20 kids and then having nothing to do with almost any of them, and then even shitting on some of your kids publicly and acting like they aren't even yours, that's a really crappy thing to do. Like it's like beyond whether or not
being awkward doesn't cause you to do that. That's just being a bad person, to be straight up honest.
Yeah, but like some people are out there like, oh, he's just a little eccentric. It's like, well, yeah, but that's just being really shitty too. It's like, oh dang, man, like bro, like that came through on the mic, bro. I heard, I was like, bro, I was like, you good? Oh man, but beyond that, that's kind of my thing. Like with I'll leave it at that. But I generally try and believe that people ought to be as sociable, but maintain some rules of civility, because I just don't like, I personally don't really like the whole thing that like a personal thing that I don't like is that he does everything as a joke. Like, he's at the cabinet meeting, he has to wear 2 hats. It's like it's a cabinet meeting. Okay, let's be a little serious here. Formal dinner, he's balancing forks on his finger. With the Tesla company, if you put all the models together, it spells sexy. It's like everything doesn't have to be a joke, Like the Department of Government Efficiency is Doge. It's like we don't have to make everything a joke. Like, it's like there are a lot of things that are jokes, and there are a lot of good jokes, and it's good to have a laugh. But when we're dealing with serious things, let's treat them seriously. Like, that's really just a lack of social skills, and honestly treating things like everything is trivial, when sometimes the balance of tens of thousands or millions or hundreds of millions of people and the way they're living might be in the balance. So, with that, hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. It's just my opinion. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. What do we got, Matthew, for some questions? I bet you we have some absolute humdingers.
So yes, we do have some humdingers. But before we get to the humdingers, we have to get to our Morse code decoders. And tonight, the entire roster: Close Thompson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, Dave Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, Arable Grubba, Johnny Dog, and Norm Pritchett. And they said the Morse code reads: Russia threatening nuclear war and pretending like they are winning, LOL. LMAO even, and LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dent on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again, because the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps continues to show us that they are able to get this thing through over and over and over again. A really impressive thing, and I gotta say that the entire Lee Spring Army is proud that y'all are able to decipher those Morse code messages and get them correct every single night without fail. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And also, with that, it is time for us to now move on into the questions themselves. And with that, also, someone said, you should keep your opinions. Well, you should keep yours, buddy.
That was an opinion in itself. Yeah, we should keep our opinions.
Yeah, it's like, man, you got to quit while you're behind. But anyways, oh, man.
And also, should we keep our opinions? If he doesn't like our opinions, should we not just get rid of them? Like, I think he's like, the grammar was all wrong too. Like, I think, buddy, it's not should keep your opinions. It should not say your opinions, or should get rid of your opinions. Just to correct that a little bit.
Man, why say lot word when few word do trick?
Yeah, a little few word didn't do no trick, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sad. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into some questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So also, by the way, someone pointed out this. Cody Fritz said, did you see the post today from the United States? I did see the post. I think it actually came out yesterday evening. It was of an AI image of an individual who's in the government as the Pope. That backfired badly. That did not go over well with the Catholic community whatsoever. So that was not popular right there. But that's all I'll say on that. I'll just move on from that. But did see that one to mention it, because I did see that the other day and I saw the backlash. But anyways, jumping into our first question here, this one is going to go to the Bearded, who says Putler does know that if he actually nuked anyone, it would be the end of him. Does he know that?
I think he oughta, but, he likes to flex his little muscles. He likes to get on the back of the horse and ride it bareback. Well, not bareback, but, bare-chested. Oh. That came out really badly right there. Like, that's but still, it came off as an insult to him, so I guess it wasn't the worst way that could happen. But beyond that, he's a little bit of a guy like that, He ought to understand it, but that won't stop him from running his mouth, because Russia is a country of people that run their mouths all the time, really, to be honest. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in the best of my opinion. That was a real misspeaking right there, man. A real one. But with that,
I'll tell you.
Oh man, I tell you. I'm telling you. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Nazir, who says, what if Ukraine attacked and accidentally killed the Chinese President Xi by accident at the parade? Honestly, I don't think Ukraine would ever risk that. Like, they're not going to risk that. If they attack the parade, I would assume that Ukraine's going to take a significant effort to get nowhere near where the dignitaries are standing. Because if they got the dignitaries, that would pretty much be the end of Ukraine. Like, I'm just going to be straight up honest, because they're going to have China, who's nuclear armed, on their back, and also have Russia on their back, and also every other ally they have is going to be coming down to Ukraine. So I don't think they're going to do that. I would say a 0% chance. And if something like that does happen, I would imagine that is a Russian false flag. But I don't even think the Russians would go that far with a false flag, because like the enforcer said, that would be found out eventually, and Russia would find themselves on the short end of the stick. But enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's probably not going to happen. I have a feeling that the diplomats that do show up will be safe. Because another thing is that the Ukrainians aren't even going to try and hit the parade in front of them. Because what if the drone got jammed, did a hard turn downwards, and then flew right into the bleachers where they were at and hit them still? That's a possibility. So there's just too much of a possibility of extremely bad collateral that could happen. And the Russians aren't going to do it either, because if they ended up killing Xi Jinping, the Chinese are going to investigate what happened. And it's going to be found out that it was the Russians that did it. Because the Chinese can't just go, oh, our leader got killed, let's just act like nothing really happened and just knee-jerk respond to it. They are going to launch a full investigation of their own and send their own investigatory teams to Moscow to figure out what happened. And if they figured out that the drone had a Russian origin to it, that would go badly. I mean, that would go insanely bad. So most likely the actual Red Square area is going to be perfectly fine during the parade. It's the areas around that might not be fine, or it's really the entirety of Russia that may come under some kind of an attack. Or it may be false flagged, either way. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here goes to Brittany Coy, who says, why are a bunch of dignitaries backing out of attending the May 9th Victory Day parade in Russia? Do you think that Russia is planning something else?
It's generally because their security isn't being guaranteed at this moment, and the Ukrainians are alluding to the idea that they may hit the parade, and a lot of these foreign leaders may just be backing out due to security concerns, or at least possible security concerns. There doesn't have to be an imminent threat of injury or death for these diplomats to back out. There just has to be a substantive risk of injury or death for them to be able to back out. So that's probably why a lot of them are at this point, because that's about the best explanation that I could give. Also, I hope that addresses that well. And also, I'm seeing an interesting amount of people saying different kinds of things. Let's see.
Different kinds of things, you say?
Different kinds of things. Yeah, all kinds of things, actually. A bunch of interesting stuff. Someone said Ukraine won't hit the parade because they don't hit civilians. Well, actually, they have hit some civilians in the past. When they first hit the Kerch Bridge the first time, they actually ended up killing 3 Russian civilians on the bridge. That was when they drove the truck bomb over it. They killed 3 people doing that. And they also killed the driver of that truck as well, which we don't even know the identity of that driver, so he may have been a civilian or a Ukrainian operative or something along those lines. The Ukrainians have also ended up getting some civilian collateral in other instances, but once again, no one can be perfectly clean in war. Things like that do happen. There will be the chance of civilian collateral. And the rules of war don't say that you have to completely avoid injuring or killing a civilian anywhere. The rules of war largely put out that you're supposed to avoid hitting purely civilian areas, but if the military is operating out of a building that does have civilians in it, generally that's up to the nation to hit it or not. It technically really isn't a war crime that much at that point to do such a thing, but if you're going out of your way to target and kill civilians, that's the issue. But if you're hitting the military and they're mingling among civilians, that technically really isn't that much of a war crime. It really isn't a war crime in most examples. So there's a little bit of nuance to that. So the Ukrainians actually could technically hit the parade and get civilian collateral, and it wouldn't be a war crime, and technically it would actually fall within their rules of engagement to do that. So I hope that does address that well, at least best I can. And also the understanding is that the military is never supposed to try and surround itself with civilians, because that's usually considered using them as a human shield. Usually you're supposed to try and make military actions occur as far away as possible from a built-up civilian area. So, try and have your military base a mile or 2 out of town or something along those lines, or at least evacuate civilians away from what's going to become an inevitable battlefield so that they're not caught in the middle of a major battle in their city streets. Where a decent amount of them could end up getting killed. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see everybody who got really excited by the fact that I responded to someone who said, free Gaza. And I said, what do you mean by free Gaza? And everybody said, do you really expect an answer, Matt? Honestly, when I see stuff like that, just blind, stuff like that, I get really curious as to what that person's position is, because to say free Gaza, I assume, because they're not responding, I assume they mean a free Gaza from Israel. And of course, we do know that Gaza is a hotbed for so many terrorist groups, it's hard to keep up with them all. So I was curious to see what that individual said, just out of just pure curiosity, I guess you could say. But anyways, moving on to our next question here. This one goes to Private Public, who said, what are the odds that the Russian nuclear weapons will function properly, and that this war has shown how broken and unreliable Russian equipment is?
Russian equipment is broken and unreliable, but that doesn't mean that all of their nuclear weapons are inoperable. We would assume that at least 40 to 50% of them are probably in a pretty operational condition on the strategic and tactical side of things, but once again, that does greatly cut down their available nuclear weaponry, but we're still talking about they still have thousands of operational nuclear weapons. So with that in mind, it's a decent amount of them that are probably not operable, and once again, we're taking our best stab at it because we'll never really know. But even still, there would be thousands of operational nuclear weapons, and it would be one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world. I think the only country that would beat them out, or the only two that would beat them out at that point, would be China and the United States, if we were to work off of what we would believe to be their actual operational number of nuclear weapons. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And also, Matthew, it looks like you have weapons free. We got a response now from that person that you're asking that question to. So go ahead and address it.
Oh, so I see they said crazy how America pays for Israelis to have free healthcare, but not their own citizens. We don't pay for their healthcare, by the way. I don't know where the hell you came up with that. We
Ah,
do give them a lot of weapons, and we let them buy a lot of nice variants of weapons, like I believe the F-35I is
a
the
deer.
variant that they get. Say what?
The F-35I a deer. I was agreeing with you.
Yes, yes, yes. The F-35I, IDR, or whatever it's called. They get a lot of nice weapons from the United States, and they do have preferential status when it comes to that. But at the same time, though, and once again, I think this person's a bot, but I just feel like arguing it anyway. Israel is a country being attacked from all sides. Israel literally fights the entire region, and Israel's not a very big country. It's a somewhat smaller country. It's very compact. And they're dealing with an enemy literally right there on their coastline, which is right there in the Gaza Strip, which happens to house a ton of different terrorist groups. So if you were Israel, you would, of course, ask the United States for all the help you could get, because when you're being attacked from Iran, all their proxy forces, also you're being attacked from the Gaza Strip, you're also having a situation popping off in Syria and also in Lebanon as well. You need all the help you can get. And once again, the victims here are not the ones that are the terrorist groups. They're the ones who are causing the problem, because Israel would generally calm down if the terrorist groups would stop attacking them. But it's such deep-rooted hatred because of their religious differences that they just can't let it go. And of course, Israel has to do what they have to do to defend themselves, and to call it anything otherwise is simply ignoring the facts, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I would agree with Matthew on pretty much all of that. It's a little bit crazy to just come up with something fictitious like we're paying for Israeli citizens' healthcare, because we don't. Where in the world in the government budget is there anything saying that we pay for the Israeli citizens' healthcare? That doesn't exist anywhere. Like, I've never seen any money go towards that at all. So the little bit of a weird claim, like, honestly, we don't even really have to dig into that any further. That just simply doesn't happen to even talk about it. So a little bit weird. Like, honestly, dude, that's like saying, I don't like Israel because America buys Netanyahu ice cream for every meal. It's like, where in the world's the proof of that? It's like, that doesn't even happen. Like, this is literally coming
Yeah.
up with something fake.
And also, it sounds like the individual, whoever they are, it sounds like they're probably not even American. So it's like, what purview is it of them as not being an American to say what America should be doing for its allies? It's like that's a internal matter, I would say. That's not something for like other countries to be dictating. And also, like for example, that's the same argument that the Russian bots make up when it comes to Ukraine, is they'll tell the political party people, the really highly political people in America, are y'all really just going to let your government pay for Ukraine's Bugattis and mansions and their health care and to pay their salaries? Like, are you really going to let them get away with that? It's like, since when are we buying them Bugattis? Like, it's like we haven't been buying them Bugattis the entire time. In fact, the Ukraine and Zelensky's having to beg for more weapons. So it's just all propaganda. I'm sure that good old Tucker Carlson will pick that up for his next segment. I'm sure.
Probably, maybe.
Exactly.
It's like instead we should send pallets of cash to Iran, because then that would make sense according to Tucker Carlson. Probably, it's like that would be better because Iran has it down, folks. Iran has it down, because they have completely stripped everyone of their rights in their country, and it's a religious ideology freak show in there. But they have it worked down because the groceries are a little bit cheaper. But when you actually compare it to what they're making in Iran versus what they're paying for, they actually are not cheaper. It's actually more expensive relative to them. So it's like, oh, well, I guess we just overlooked that one. And also, that is so stupid to me, like that he did that, man. That was such a disingenuous thing that people wouldn't pay attention to. It's like, the people in Russia aren't making the same as the people in America are making in the amount of money that they're getting. So it's like, yeah, to an American, a $1 stick of butter is, in that just this example, and it's not a realistic one, but a $1 stick of butter is looking pretty cheap. But it's like the Russians are also making a fifth less of what an American is making. So it's like, then that stick of butter is 3 times cheaper, but you're also making 5 times less, meaning that it's still more expensive for a Russian to buy a stick of butter than it is for us, because they're making a lot less money than us. And while the product's cheaper than the one we have over here, it's still not as cheap as it should be to be even on parity with what it's costing us relative to what we're making. It was such a stupid argument for him to make, and it was such a misleading one.
It's true. Also something else stupid about the Middle East is if Iran, and once again, this shows you how bad the hatred is coming out of Iran and all the proxy groups against Israel. If Iran would play by the Russian playbook, what Putin did for the last 20 to 25 years before he started this escalation with Crimea and Ukraine, Putin fooled the West for almost 2 decades. He fooled the West into allowing the Russian economy to build itself up and also build up their military force as well. Even though it's not fantastic, it still gave them a chance to actually build it up compared to what Iran's doing. Iran can't put their hatred aside for one even single second, because if they did that and Iran laid low and acted like they were friends of the West, or at least leaning neutral somewhat, they could probably do exactly what Russia did and dupe the West and build their whole economy up, build everything up, and also probably end up sneaking the development of a nuclear weapon in there as well. And then they could flip just like Russia did. But they hate everybody in the Middle East so bad, especially Israel, they can't even do that for a second.
Yeah, also, man, something that's funny is that after the Soviet Union collapsed, like in 1991, their GDP was just falling. Like, look at that. It got all the way down to $195 billion. That's pitiful.
Yeah, look at that. And they started building it up when they started fooling everybody. Like they had literally every president, not just one single political party. They had Bush, Obama, they had everybody fooled. And they went for a long time until they finally started trying to annex Crimea. They started some provocations elsewhere, and now they did the ultimate one by invading Ukraine.
Dude, the Russian economy is pitiful, honestly, man. Look at how it's just stagnated since 2008. Look at that.
It's honestly, it's kind of on par with Canada's economy. Not bashing Canada, by the way. I'm just looking at the chart. It's actually kind of similar to it.
It kind of is. Germany's been doing well for itself. They've really been putting out recently, like 4.5 trillion. That's a pretty impressive GDP. How about Japan? Because I think Japan's actually starting to slide back. Yeah, they're sliding down. Hate to see it. Man, Japan actually got outdone. Hold up. So Germany is now the 3rd largest economy on the planet again, which it hasn't been for decades, by the way. So now Japan is number 4 and Germany is number 3. I actually didn't realize that recently because I've been saying on air for a good while now that Japan is the 3rd largest economy in the world. I'm wrong. It's actually Germany now.
That's crazy. That really is nuts. I can't believe in a nutshell, not too deep of a rabbit hole. What caused this in Japan?
Decreasing size of the workforce, really.
Oh, okay, so it's the birth rate?
Yeah, it's the whole birth rate fertility thing. There's not that many people getting into the workforce as there are going out at this point, so that's why the GDP is starting to fall. And also there's a whole bunch of other things that are going on, like China's kind of sapping a lot of their electronics industry from them, and that's been the thing. But beyond that, it's really just the declining workforce. That's the big number one explanation for that. That's why, dude, the Japanese politicians are getting on television. They're crying and they're like, have kids, please, because they're watching the GDP fall.
That's I don't understand why these countries that are trying to boost their birth rates, they're going about it all the wrong way, at least in my opinion. They tell people, please have more kids. We need to bolster our population for our economy. It's average people honestly really don't care that much. Most people act out of self-interest. So the best thing to tell people is, we're making it incentivized for you to have kids. We give you a tax break. We also do other things to make it really nice for people to have kids, have parks for them to go to raise their children in this ideological, utopia when people imagine having a family. Create that environment. Nobody's going to have a kid because the country needs more workers. I don't think most people have kids to create just workers like that. If people do, that's a little bit interesting, but
or wage slaves. Yeah.
I don't think they're doing it for that reason. Honestly, they're okay, let's have some wage slaves. So let's just have a few kids here for a few more wage slaves here. I don't think that's the reason why they're doing it. But if they would market it the right way, it would actually be a genuine campaign.
Man, like the reality is that if they would make it to where the work-life balance existed again and it wasn't all work, people would be having kids on their own. It's like the reality is that a lot of people are having to pretty much focus entirely on their careers to survive these days, and even still, it's pretty tough. So the idea of bringing a kid into the world financially just doesn't make sense for most people. It's certainly like that in Japan. In Japan, they have made it to where there is no work-life balance. It's all about work, and if you're not living that kind of a life, you're out. It's like if they would change that kind of an aspect about Japan, their population figures would start to change a good bit. Instead, they're like, no, let's keep the no work-life balance, and let's just try and make them have kids anyways, although they won't even be able to really take care of those kids at all. So it's like, that is stupid. It's like, that just won't work. And that's really honestly the problem that exists anywhere in the world at this point. And also due to the fact that a lot of people have a high expectation of standards of living, which are an issue. I think people ought to live in pods and eat some bugs. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm just entirely joking on that.
No, it's not a problem. It's not a problem with the standard of living. Like, most people can't even have kids until they get really, really financially stable, like to a point where they have some savings. And for most people right now, like especially young people these days, that's a hard spot to get to, like having savings, because most of your money is going out. If you have like just let's say an average salary, most of your money is going out every single month to pay every bill you've got, and then some. If you're in debt because you went to college and you were sold on that, then you're paying down probably a pretty large student loan that's probably zapping you the rest of your money, or could be sending you into the negative, actually. And I've heard some horror stories about student loans recently that made me feel like, oh, I actually didn't have it too bad, actually, when it comes to my student loan. But, some people have it a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting. Also, someone said countries actually pay for some people to have kids, like Netherlands. Let's go pull up the population of the Netherlands. And also, by the way, there is a positive growth.
Oh, wow,
there.
look at that. Those three right there almost linear. That's crazy.
Well, not really linear. I mean, the Netherlands is growing. I mean, from 2000 to 2020, they've added about another 3 million people to the population, which is pretty significant for a country that only has a population in the present day of about 18 million people. That's actually pretty good. Belgium's doing a thing. I don't really know what they're doing because it looks like it kind of like rose and dropped slightly and then it's been climbing gradually. And Switzerland's just been slowly growing. But I actually heard a horror story. Let me know, Swiss people, if this is true, that apparently Switzerland's run like a giant HOA, which is a homeowners association here in America. Let me know if that's true because I actually heard that somewhere the other day and there's like every single thing is like micromanaged and there's like pensioners that wander around town looking for the slightest violations to report them to the city authorities. I was like, that sounds really medieval. Like that honestly sounds like how a medieval town is run. I was like, I wonder if that's the case, because that would be interesting. Well, you know what? Let's go look at some other countries like Austria. Oh, actually, that's not doing too bad, but the Czech Republic is quite literally flatlined.
Yeah, it really is. Also, by the way, I want to say this real quick because someone said this in the chat. They said you can listen to me. Let me scroll back up and find it. Well, where the hell did it go? There it is. Juniper said that's an outdated argument. You can raise a family on 60,000 salary. I'll be honest with you. I did the numbers just now, and I took the taxes out at 60,000, and that comes out to about 3,700 a month, roughly. For a whole family, for like unless the wife is working too, that's not going to be getting you very far because the rent alone is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000. That's most of your money gone right there, and then you got to try to stretch $1,700 amongst yourself, your wife, your kids for food, car, gas, utilities. I don't think you're making it too good on that. Like honestly, for a whole family.
No, actually, you'd probably be losing money because just the cost in food alone and also having to provide for other things for your kids would probably start to run you in the negative every month, making 60 grand before taxes. And
then childcare, because let's say both the husband and wife are working, you got to have somebody to look after your kids. So, the childcare alone would wipe out the rest of your money that you were making. You'd definitely be living off a credit card at that point.
And also, Right Guys Senior said, "I'm a single parent, and no way." And I'd agree. Like, I'm not even a parent, and I know that would be a tough one to push. And let's see, let's go look at some other populations, man. How about Germany? Germany. Damn, dude, look at Turkey.
Dang, Turkey is like flat, man, just pure flat.
No. Turkey's the one in orange, dude. That's literally intersecting all of them and just shooting up through the sky.
That's crazy,
man. France.
Turkey is the yellow one. I thought it was the blue one. My bad.
No. Germany's the blue one. Germany's flatlined for decades now. Honestly, it's just kind of like fluctuating. And that's something interesting. Let's see. Oh, well, their fertility rate is low. So I don't even know how they're really keeping that stable. I guess it's immigration, possibly. I've heard that that's a big thing these days for Germany, because they actually have had a pretty significant influx of Turkish citizens immigrating into Germany, really since the 70s, actually. So I guess that's how they're kind of keeping their population stable, but pretty interesting. Let's go look at the UK. Oh, the UK is actually growing.
The UK is growing. All of these are growing at sort of the same rate.
Sort of the same rate. How about the good old US of A? Oh my goodness. Dude, look at that.
Man, we're doing good. I hope it doesn't have a sudden dip.
And our fertility rate's only 1.66. Which usually you have to, I think, have a fertility rate over 2 to actually just sustain the population, instead of, growing it. So that's a little interesting.
Is that so? Wait a minute. Like the math is really not mathing a little bit. So it's 1.66 births per woman, according in 2022, where we seem to be growing at a rate that outmatches the birth rate, if my math in my head is correct. So I think this is accounting for a lot of immigration.
I think so, actually, because if I'm correct, folks, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you have to have a fertility rate of 2 to just break even. Because
This is a lot of immigration. Like this is like we're talking about like freaking millions or something, because that birth rate is not very high.
so from the year 2000, we've gone from 282 million people to 340. So that's about an increase of about 80 million people over a 20-year period. So,
Hmm.
I wonder if the fertility rate's been that low the whole time, because it might just be for 2022, because the fertility rates have been crashing. So, and everyone's saying it's actually 2.2 to 2.1. But the reason why is because, speaking about it in a very clinical way, a breeding pair consists of 2 people, so you have to be able to bring 2 additional offspring into the world to offset those 2 people in the breeding pair. Like, just to put it in like a very clinical way, where like we're talking about livestock or something. Because in the end of the day, we kind of all are. But we're just kind of like we're kind of just livestock working in the system.
Yes, that's a nice breeding pair over there. Oh, that's a nice couple.
So anyways, you have to have 2. So you have to have 2 to replace them. So the fact that it's 1.6, there's no way for the U.S. population to grow naturally. It'd actually be declining year over year, at least a couple of decades from now, or it's at any point if it stayed that way for a while, because there's no other way to work it. So let me take this off screen and let me go put in USA fertility rate, and let's see if we can get that year over year, just in case if it pulls up something bad. I got to put it off screen. Oh, actually, dude, it dropped off. Look at this. Went from 3.65 in 1960 to 1975, it was 1.7.
The sad thing is, this kind of coincides with like economic troubles a little bit.
A little, yeah, it kind of actually does a little bit. That's interesting though, man. That fertility rate like literally crashed over like just about a decade and a half. That's a shame, honestly. But that does mean that really from about 1976 onwards, the U.S. has only actually really been able, by technicality, to really only support its population size and not grow it. So pretty much all of the growth on top of the population just pretty much maintaining itself over most of those decades, it must be from immigration, because there's no other way to explain the growth like that. So a little bit.
What's the death rate?
The death rate. See, I don't actually know. Let me go check. Let's see. USA mortality rate. So they don't have a graph for that one. Apparently that one's a little bit too morbid for them to show. But let's see. Are
you sure they don't have like a chart on that? Because we should. What the hell is that?
It's a stupid ad. It's a website that's got like ads all over it. So let me see if I can go get the CDC. Oh, here we go. Well, I can't get it year over year like the other graphs were showing, but I can get it kind of close enough to this. Oh wow, the infant mortality rate is insanely low.
We got life expectancy of 77 years old in the U.S., which is, I think, pretty high. Let's see, a lot of heart disease, a lot of cancer. So is there like a rate?
Sadly, I don't think so.
I think it might be 100%.
Yeah, it's 100% for all the people who are dying. All the people who are coming around to dying, they're dying. But you know what's interesting is that the life expectancy is actually far greater than it really ever has been in most of history. Because when Social Security was created, it was expected that the average lifespan was 65. So actually, yeah, I think that is the case because I think Social Security kicks in. Oh, hold up, wait a minute. Social Security actually kicks in at 65, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So if I remember correctly, Social Security was only supposed to really cover you for the last 10 years of your life. So if it kicks in when you're 65, the US government was expecting that you'd be dead by 75, give or take a couple of years, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. But it was generally expected that you would pay in enough over your life that you'd be able to withdraw for about 10 years and then die. So the problem nowadays with Social Security is that you pay in that amount like you always have done. But the problem is that a lot of people are living far more. And apparently, it's you can opt in at 62, but they are increasing it. So it was somewhere you're supposed to like live for only 10 years after that, and then drop dead somewhere around there, so that way it would break even. But the problem is that people are living older than expected, which is starting to cause an issue because a lot of these people are getting you get Social Security until you die. So once you know surpass the average life expectancy that was created at the origin of Social Security, then you're actually eating into the money that the other people are supposed to be getting. And that's why a lot of people have been calling it a Ponzi scheme lately, is because nowadays people are living so long and they're withdrawing so much from Social Security, the system wasn't designed for that, so there's not really enough money left in the pot for future generations to be able to pull from as well. So that's really where the issue's been coming from with Social Security lately, to explain that to all of y'all in a nutshell and what's really happening with that. So interesting.
Seems like the government could probably just like print some funds and add a little bit to the pot, because it's like, if everybody's paying into Social Security, we don't want to have like a generation that comes up to withdrawal time and then they're told like we're out. So, like, I think the government could probably just print a little cash to add to that pot.
Yeah, honestly, I think this would be wildly unpopular, and this is why no one wants to do it. I think that there should be a re-legislation of Social Security where you can only withdraw from it for 10 years, which it was generally designed to do. But people don't like that because, it's like, what if you live beyond those 10 years? You're 65, well, you're 62, you live to 72, and then they stop paying you. It's like, what are you supposed to do for the remaining years? And, and then that would be a major issue. So they can either up the age where you can start to withdraw from Social Security, which would be wildly unpopular, or you can create a cap on how many years you can get payouts from Social Security, which also would be wildly unpopular. So there really is no way to really fix Social Security without pissing everyone off. Like, that's kind of the reality of it. So a really tough one to fix. Honestly, I don't envy anyone who has to try and fix that. And of course, considering that I would have to try and I want to get into politics in the future and try and become the president. This is an issue that's actually a pretty major one as far as how government funding has been working. And there just really, honestly, folks, is no real good way to work around this without just pissing a lot of people off. Like, that's the truth of it. No matter which way you try and fix it, there's just no good way to make people happy with it.
I think honestly, the only solution is people are just going to have to suck it up. And honestly, like, there's no reason people shouldn't be working until they're 90. Like, I mean, they're going to have to get a grip. I mean, if you need to work until you're 90, like, that's just what you have to do. Like, look, the government told me this. Okay, they said, look, you're going to have to suck it up and just keep working. You can't be lazy. I mean, 90 years old and sitting at home and enjoying the rest of their life. I mean, we can't have that.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I'm joking. I'm sarcastic, by the way. I want to make that clear. Like, before I get jumped or something, I'm being sarcastic.
Also, someone said this conversation with Social Security going broke due to people living longer is propaganda to cut taxes. No, it's not. This is actually what it is. I mean, like, I don't know if you know how the bill was passed. It was passed back in the day under FDR and under the Congress of his time. And they mathed it out to where you would pay in enough over your life that they would be able to pay everyone out for the last 10 years of their life. So that was what was expected. That's how it was designed to work. So if everyone on average is living longer than 10 years, they're withdrawing money that they actually didn't pay in to withdraw from. So then they're pulling out of the accounts of people who are currently paying in right now for the large part. That's kind of how it works. So that's where the actual issue is coming from. The reality, I don't really know like why you would say that, because the reality is that really, if you wanted to fix it, either you have to raise taxes or you have to find the money from somewhere. So you either raise taxes or you just start borrowing loads of money to cover the difference, or you legislate a way to where it goes back to it only exists for about 10 years of payouts. So you either up the age where you can start to initially take your Social Security payouts, or you create a cap where it only exists for 10 years or so if you wanted to work off of the original model. But a lot of people wouldn't like that because that sounds stupid. Like, it sounds stupid to me. It's really the only way they would be able to work, but it sounds stupid. So really the only way you could do it is either to raise taxes to try and cover the difference, or just start to borrow money just for the purpose of paying into the Social Security payouts, which could start to cause financial issues later on down the road for most people. So, that's
Also, someone said, what was the purpose of Social Security? The purpose of Social Security, the way I understand it, it's mainly in place so that way everybody contributes to the pot. And the people that really did not plan for retirement very well are the people that end up coming on hard times around the time of older age, like around the retirement age, or at least on average. That way, they're not in a really, really tough bind where they're having to literally like live on the street or something.
It's a security
That's the point of it. It's a social safety net. But the problem is, though, and here's something controversial I think about. Instead of Social Security, why don't we have something where it's like a government mandated individual retirement account? Like, let's say it's a mandated Roth IRA for individuals, where you have to contribute a certain amount of your income to it. And instead of putting it into your Social Security payments, I think it's part of FICA. You just put it right into that government mandated account. That seems like a better way. But I think the logic behind it is that some people would even refuse to do that, and we still need to look after those people according to the social safety net theory. So I think that was the purpose.
I would actually have to say I like the idea, and I see someone trying to say that this is being brought up to try and explain killing off Social Security. And no, I don't think Social Security should ever be killed off. But we have to try and figure out a way to make it work, because we can't kill it, but we also can't keep running it the way it's running right now because it's killing itself. So we have to figure out some way to change it to make it work. And there's a whole bunch of different ways that we could skin this cat, to use an old saying, but we have to find a way that actually would work in the long term, because how it's working right now is not feasible. It's kind of like how nationalized health insurance also has been running into some issues. And while some people may like it or not, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it certainly needs to be reworked a good bit. Much like the Social Security system, they're good ideas in theory to create social security nets and such things, but they're implemented, or they're at least operating in a way that wasn't originally anticipated, and they're starting to break themselves because of that. So we need to go in and try and conduct some preventative maintenance to stop it from imploding on itself. That's largely what I would say about it, because right now with how it's working, it really is not working. Like, that's really the only way that we can put it. And it's been an issue that everyone's been trying to figure out for years. What do we do to fix it? And kind of right now, the idea is that it's a lot more convenient just to borrow money and not actually try and fix it long term. Just, short term, make sure the payouts keep going out. But that
really is a Ponzi scheme. Like, that's actually like the definition of a Ponzi scheme. Like, the people come in to withdraw their cash out of the Ponzi scheme, and it turns out they actually don't have the money on hand, so they have to start borrowing more money from more people to try to give it out to Paul, who wanted their money back.
Honestly, thinking about your idea of creating a Roth IRA, if I'm correct, Matthew, I don't really do a lot on retirement planning right now, folks, just to put that out there. Matthew's doing that a little bit more than me. But with a Roth IRA, you're investing in stocks long term, right?
Well, it's an individual investment account, and you can invest in what you want. I think that would be the problem that most people have with it. It's self-directed, meaning you have to have a little bit of knowledge to run the account. Now, there are pre-established portfolios out there that some brokerages do offer, where it like gives you a guideline or a robo investor that can sort of invest your money in safe bets for you. But yeah, if somebody's deciding that on their own, they could get into too risky investments, like large cap stocks or things like that, and they could find themselves in a bad position. Like, let's say this economic crash, which recently happened, takes place when somebody's about to retire, and they lose 20% of their value on their portfolio. They could be in a bad spot. So that would be a bit of a problem, I guess you could say. But yeah, an IRA is just a retirement account, it's a self-directed investment account with tax benefits.
Interesting. It sounds like an interesting idea until you think a stock market crashes, but at the same time, if everyone was having to create some sort of a retirement plan like that and it was government mandated, wouldn't that give some sort of general safety net to the stock market to create less severe crashes, because a lot of these people,
Uh,
well, maybe.
you can sell your investments in a Roth IRA without actually withdrawing the money from it, which means that person would still be taking that loss if there was a crash. So no, if people started panic selling like they like to do when crashes hit, like they just did like a couple of months ago or a month ago, they would still take a huge hit, and the stock market would still go down the toilet.
But when you think about it, man, when you really think about this is honestly kind of a goofy argument, because hasn't the government legislated for quite a while that most companies have to create for their full-time employees retirement pay, so that way if they were working for their company for decades and they finally age out of the workforce, they're supposed to be getting retirement payments from the retirement department of these companies. I mean, like it's really.
Well,
Hmm?
that would be a pension. That most companies don't offer pensions anymore, but they do offer employer-sponsored 401ks, which can be matched by the employer. But I'll be honest, I don't know a whole bunch about that because I've never had a 401k, so I'm not very educated in it. But it's employee-sponsored with a match.
I would have to say maybe what we could do, maybe this would be an idea. Maybe we could get an idea of legislating that major companies with full-time employees have to pay retirement pensions to those retired employees. So that way, at least a large, significant portion of the workforce isn't having to draw entirely from Social Security. Or maybe we could make it to where if the employers are paying out retirement, Social Security is at a reduced rate to try and stretch the money and make it work for other folks. Possibly that might be an idea. I'm just spitballing, folks. This isn't like hardball ideas I'm putting out here. I'm just trying to throw out different ideas because there's 1,000 different ways you could try and make this work. So any way that you could make it work is quite all right by me. But still, it's a really tough one to fix because nothing you do.
They're
would
not
really
doing pensions, by the way. Like the companies are never returning to pensions. Like under the current economy that we have right now, and the way that companies run themselves and how they're becoming mega corporations, they will never start doing pensions. If they did that, the company would be taking a loss, and under no circumstance is a modern company going to take a loss like that for the benefit of a worker. That's never going to happen.
Man, back then they didn't have a choice, man. Because I remember reading about, of course, I'm going to go back to my most recent example, the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. The employees started to go on quite a large number of strikes in the 50s, and they forced the railroad at that point. Oh, well, actually, they already had retirement plans, but they forced the railroad at that point to actually up the retirement to a significant amount. Kind of like how Pan Am and a lot of those airlines have really, really nice, retirement options and plans where they pay out significant pensions. It was kind of similar like that. Honestly, I'd say, when you think about it, man, honestly, everything economically was worked out pretty well in the 1950s and 60s when the government actually was able to regulate things and they weren't being stomped by lobbyists. Honestly, we could just return to that somehow, some way. So really having to work with the lobbyist element being the first primary block to chop. We could probably get the system just running completely fine like it used to, and not really have to reinvent the wheel, just try and figure out a way to remove lobbyist influence to be able to get back to the heavy enough government regulation and legislations that made those sorts of things a reality like they are back in the day.
Yeah, what's interesting is airlines actually did offer pensions to their employees, their pilots, for quite some time. We actually had a family member that was a pilot. I won't name the airline they worked for, but the airline actually laid off the pilots in mass and offered, I think it was buyout deals for the pilots to let them go ahead and get off the retirement with a little less the company would have to pay out for their pension. And the individual did take a payout, but I don't know if airlines still do that or not for pilots. But that was as recent as like 5 or 6, 7 years ago. So I'm not sure if they're doing that anymore or not. You'd have to look that up. I think airlines might still be doing pensions in some way for like maybe senior pilots.
I think so. And also, I see someone say, let's see. Yeah, someone said, well, the LNN doesn't exist anymore. Who's getting that retirement now? Well, technically, those retirement pension payouts were insured because the LNN never ceased to exist. Like, it wasn't a company that just like bankrupted and imploded on itself. It actually merged with Seaboard Coastline to create the Family Line system. And then later on, the Seaboard Family Line system then merged with the Chessie system, and then they created Chessie Systems Seaboard. Actually, it was Yeah, it was Chessie System Seaboard Consolidated, which is CSX. So a lot of those retirement pensions were still being paid out from the L&N's time under the Seaboard family lines, and also later on CSX. Although I actually think railroads still do pay out pensions, actually, because the railroads exist in a time of their own still for the large part with how everything works. So I think a lot of that stuff actually still exists for most railroad employees. But
I just thought of a great idea. What if the United States ups its tax rate, a flat tax across the board, 100% tax on every American citizen, and
great
then the
idea.
government can take that money and pay 100% of it back to the citizen and let them have their money back.
That is an amazing idea, Matthew. 100%
Mhm.
tax with 100% tax refunds. Truly,
It's also, and in addition to that, we can take the 99%, like income earners in the country, the 99%, and we can put them in the 1%.
Matthew. I never knew that I had a genius on my show for this many years. Like, that is
Like
truly
this
amazing.
is fantastic. Like I feel like an economist galore here. I feel.
I'm actually correct here, Matthew. Railroads like CSX actually still do have retirement pension plans.
That's interesting. It seems like transportation industry still kind of has that. I think because I saw Ms. Diesel point this out, people these days like to switch companies quite a bit. They don't like to stick with a company, and I think that's partially because the company really doesn't have like decent benefits, and also they're treating the workers kind of like crap. That's a part of the reason why people change a lot. But it's sort of up for debate why people are changing. Some people are just like transient; they like to go to different companies because they like a different culture or whatever. But it seems like that the transportation industry generally keeps people and retains people longer. Look, it says it right there. Vested employees with 5 years of credible service get an annuity from the Railroad Retirement Board. That's kind of interesting.
Man, honestly, man, that's actually kind of nice. Like, I actually didn't know that they gave retirement plans in the railroads. Because I remember like when they were talking about it in the history of the L&N, it was actually it was never considered throughout most of their early history for like the first 50 years to ever do a retirement plan at all. And then the railroad company said, "Hey, wouldn't that be kind of like neat?" Just to like give them a retirement. Like, there wasn't any strike that made them do it. They just went, well, wouldn't that be kind of like nice to give them a retirement plan? Because some of these people are working for us for like 40 years, and they really don't have any transferable skills like after they quit. And also, most of them are like in their 50s and 60s and stuff. So then they brought forward the retirement plans in the LNN, which later on
Thanks,
turned
unions.
into. The union actually didn't do that one. Crazily enough, like
Are you sure?
the Louisville and Nashville actually largely would provide benefits to their employees most of the time up until the 50s without having to have union involvement.
Huh, that's interesting. I see a lot of people saying that the railroad jobs and the transportation jobs are generally unionized, so maybe that's why they have pensions still. That would honestly make sense to me because I don't think these companies, which are also publicly traded for profit, would necessarily want to give a pension. But it seems like maybe they got some of that collective bargaining power going on, and they kind of had to just do it.
The LNN had unions, had a union that formed in it, I think about 1910, but they really didn't do much until about the 50s, because the 1950s was when things started to get really competitive for the railroad, because the railroads were hamstrung by significant congressional legislation. While there wasn't really that much legislation for trucking or any other kind of industry that was competing with the railroad, including intermodal shipping containers by sea. So the railroads started to get a lot more competitive, and that's when they started penny pinching, and that's when in the history of the LNN the strikes really started to become a thing of being for the remainder of its history, was really from the 50s onwards. But crazily enough, man, the LNN actually was very generous to their employees. They would give them gifts for every 5 years of service, and I mean a lot of them were actually quite nice. They would give them bonuses, pensions, all kinds of stuff, and they generally did it because the railroad was wildly prosperous and was making a good amount of money. And of course, this was before the time, Matthew, of the Dodge v. Ford case, which laid out the case precedent that you had to go out of your way to benefit the shareholders no matter what, and you could not do anything just out of austerity's sake. So that was kind of the times before that, when a company could do things just for the posterity of it. But then things started to change, and the 50s came around and it became a lot more competitive. And then that's when they started to, try and, stymie the employees and their benefits a little bit.
I think that if America would change back to this model or change to this model, that if people, I think most people across the board in America, if they could simply get a good, stable job that pays decent, and they could keep that job for pretty much the remainder of their working career, of their lifespan, that they can actually work up till retirement and get decent benefits from it and a decent salary, and also have decent working conditions, I think most people would be generally happy with that. The problem is that even is fleeting these days. Like, it's kind of hard to find even that. But if you could get, like, let's say just like the average salary with like a pension, decent benefits like healthcare, things like that, and also you showed up every day and worked your, like, let's say 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or maybe occasionally on the weekends too, for as many years as you can work there until you retire, I think that would be ideal for most people. That's basically a return back to what we used to have, because this current in working environment, in my opinion, is honestly quite shit. Like, it's really crappy. Like, even if a worker is, loyal to a company, they're not going to get that in return. It's not going to be reciprocated in most cases, unless it's a rare exception of one of these other companies that happens to care a little bit. But that's a problem to me. Like, it really creates a bad quality of life for most people across the country because of the lack of loyalty between companies and workers.
Absolutely. And man, what was crazy, man? I was like, speaking of some things, man, to give you an idea of how crazy it was back in the day, there was one employee of the railroad, the LNN, that worked for them for 65 years straight. Like worked for them from when he was like 16 or something, all the way up until he literally was, in his 60s, late 60s, I believe, and he was of retirement age, somewhere around there. I think it was actually in the 70s. So, like, you know what they did for him?
What they do?
They bought him the finest watch they could, gave him a massive, this was before they even had the retirement plans, because he retired from the company in the 1880s. So they had no retirement plans at this point because it just didn't exist. So they gave him a massive bonus at the end when he was retiring. They gave him the finest watch that they could find. And then they also gave him a literal diamond encrusted L&N lapel to wear for the rest of his life, and it was the only one ever given out in the whole company's history, and all that was just done as a thanks to him for working for the company for that long. You would never hear of something like that these days, dude. Like, a company would, like, hear someone retiring like that, and they wouldn't even know who the hell their name was. They would call him, like, employee 1163 or something like that, and they would, be, oh, well, it's time to replace their position, put out an advertisement for a new job, and we'll get, like, 800 applicants. We won't accept any of them, and it'll be like, damn, hoops to even get a new guy into that position. And it's like, well, that's honestly a shame that things used to be different back in the day, and nowadays they're not at all the case. That's just not the case anymore.
I think, generally speaking, that instead of running for just, bulk numbers, like trying to double the GDP, triple the GDP, also same thing goes for companies, trying to double the profit margin, triple the profit margin at all expenses possible. If it means cutting workers' benefits, if it means cutting the benefits to the consumer that's buying the product, all that kind of stuff. If we would back off of that in this country and focus more on quality of life, and also while still growing a company, but not trying to, send it to the moon overnight or something at the expense of everybody's quality of life, I think we would find that patriotism would probably return to a moderate degree. We'd also have, people would probably be way more willing to defend the country at that point because they don't want to lose that nice quality of life. But, chasing just pure numbers and chasing profits, chasing GDP growth and things like that, chasing that at all costs is actually, I think, hurting the quality of life in the country. It's hurting the morale, and it's making a lot of people really not feel grateful to live here anymore because they're starting to really have a bad day-to-day life when it comes to that sort of quality right there.
So what you're saying is you want us to become Europe.
And also, I want to say this, by the way, as well. Even in the kind of rough shape that America's kind of gotten to right now, it's still the best country on the planet, by the way. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm being ungrateful for it. Even with the problems, it's still the best place to work, in my opinion, the best place to live. Because if you look at other countries, they've got some problems that are a bit different, or they're way worse than what we have. Like, we don't even compare to China. When it comes to that, like, China's work conditions are still, like, abysmally worse in the United States by a long shot, and it goes for that for most third world countries. So we're still good. It's just that we need to get back to what we used to have. We know how good it can be. So we just know a different perspective, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's a great country to live in, but considering it's a great country, we want to make sure it remains a great country, and so we always have to be trying to figure out how to improve things and make it better. Not that we're saying that the whole system's shot and the country's cooked and it's all over, and just give up. The thing is, though, is that it's a great country, it's a wonderful country. It does have some flaws and some problems, and we always want to be apt and ready to go to try and fix them the best we can and ensure that people are always happy and proud to be an American. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, we have started to run overtime for tonight, so we are going to be rounding up and gathering a couple of more live chats and then rounding out this night's stream. Although I hope that y'all found this conversation to be interesting, because we don't really get to touch on stuff like that from time to time, but I always find it fun to talk about, especially when we keep it nice and tame and we don't act like political rhetoric is the main determinant of how this whole thing goes. But with that, we are on to the last question of the night.
All right. So also big shout out to Wanda McIntosh, who put in a $50 donation and helped to bring us to the $3,450 raised on the fundraiser. And thank you very much, Wanda, for that generosity. And jumping into our next question here, this one is going to go to Knox Date, who said, in your guys' opinion, what is the timetable for the invasion of Taiwan when it's going to kick off?
I would say most likely, although there's a lot of alarm bells going off, still probably 2 years from now, because the Chinese Navy has to be of a significant size and ability to be able to support a large enough amphibious force to actually make the invasion work. So I'd still say about 2 years off. But Matthew, what are you thinking?
When it comes to invading Taiwan, I think China is waiting to see what's going to happen with Ukraine. That's probably what they're waiting for. So I don't think they're going to do it yet. I think it is, like the enforcer said, maybe a year or two off.
And so with that, I hope we both addressed that well. And we are on to the to last question of the night.
All right, so this one is going to go to, let's see here, Kevin Thatcher, who said, Enforcer Matt, don't you think that Russia is going to use a strategic nuke? And that's the reason they have built up a camp and military presence on the Finnish border.
It's not entirely impossible to say that they may use a nuclear weapon, but it's highly unlikely in my opinion. And also, especially against a NATO state, that would be a preemptive attack with a nuclear weapon, which the Russian nuclear doctrine simply does not allow for. There is a slightly better excuse to nuke Ukraine out of the two, but still, it would be a really tough sell, even for the Russians to do something like that. So I would say probably unlikely, probably highly unlikely, really, but there is a very minuscule chance that it could happen. And so with that, I hope that has addressed that well, and we are on to the to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Brittany Coy, who says cutting off the water seems like a very big escalation over hits fired at one area of the border over there near India and Pakistan. And have there been tensions for a long time? Because why did it pop off like this?
Well, it's not really about shots being fired at the border that's making them cut the water off. It's more so that 40 civilians got killed in the Palagram massacre, which is really what made this kick off about 11 days ago at this point. But the reason why they're cutting off the water isn't a response or punishment to the government of Pakistan and really the people of Pakistan for the government of Pakistan sponsoring the attack at Palagram. And that's really what's been going on so far. And the tensions and hatred here has existed for decades. And of course, some people try and make everything sound age-old and it's lasted for 1,000 years and 50 generations and all that. But what really, at least the modern tensions have really risen over the past 70 years since the Republic of India gained its independence and then Pakistan split off from India and then Bangladesh further split off from Pakistan itself. So that's really where all the tensions come from over the past 70 years is everything resulting from that. It's a really big rabbit hole to actually explain it in depth. It's about as deep and intricate a rabbit hole as the one that exists over who owns Israel. It's just kind of like getting into that whole thing. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, so this one is going to go to, let's see here. This one goes to JR Does Stuff, who puts in a nice question. I was about to say a support, but it's a question. But he said 4 to 6 months ago, United 24 showed a video of a Ukraine-produced cruise missile, and they called it a rocket drone. So we know if it's been used yet or tested yet. Do we know?
We've heard of rocket drones being used in the past. I can't really confirm if it's that one in particular, but we have seen that rocket-propelled drones have been used, or jet-propelled drones have been used. That one, however, I cannot confirm that it actually has been used. There's a decent amount of research and development that happens in any given military, and a lot of that research and development actually ends up nowhere in that form, but some of the information and some of the research that they gain from that project might be applied to future programs. So it's possible that that specific system, since we haven't ever really seen it in use, may have been considered a failure due to cost reasons, production reasons, or any other, like, for example, a resource shortage in what would be needed to use that specific weapon system. But nevertheless, they were able to learn some information from researching and developing that weapon that might be used on a different system later that may actually be implemented. So that would be the best answer I could give on that at the moment, because I personally have not heard of that system in use a lot currently, but we have heard of systems that have used a similar kind of propulsion method in use, but not that specific one. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one is going to go to Plazath, who says, can you guys have a talk about what Turkey is doing in Syria, and if that means anything for NATO as a whole?
That's a good question. Can you reread that one again, Matthew?
So they said about can you guys have a talk? And yes, we can, about what Turkey is doing in Syria, and if it means anything for NATO as a whole. Honestly, I will say this before the enforcer answers while he's compiling his thoughts, that I think that what Turkey is doing in Syria, really to me doesn't make much sense, because I know that Turkey has the objective of trying to power project in the region. Turkey's been trying to expand their influence for quite some time. They're trying to do it in Syria. But the problem is Syria is really just a hotbed of military activity from all these different factions, including the new Jolani extremist regime. And of course, Israel has their own interest down there in southern Syria, where the Druze people are at. So for Turkey to willingly hop into a hotbed like that, where they know that there's so many different people fighting, seems really stupid, even if they want to expand their influence, because Israel is a force to be reckoned with, and they seem to be going head to head with them. So I'm really not sure what they're up to, but it seems really ill-advised. But Enforcer, what say you?
What Turkey is trying to do in Syria is continue their mini-sphere expansion. Turkey understands they would never be able to be an actual sphere of influence in the world, but they do want to try and create a large economic sphere that surrounds them that almost mirrors the very borders of the Ottoman Empire that collapsed about a century ago at this point, near to, I believe, about well, actually, it was the end of World War I. It was 1918. And then from 1918 to 1921, the Turkish War of Independence was fought, where Turkey was able to secure its independence from pretty much being chopped up into pieces, and the Republic of Turkey came out of its ashes. But beyond that, the Turks have been trying to conduct a large amount of economic sphere building inside the Balkans and also in the Middle East. But their actions in the Middle East largely revolve more around trying to get ideological partners, which in turn will become economic partners. So the Republic of Turkey wants to make itself look like it might be the defender of the Islamic faith, or at least Islamic ideologies. This naturally puts them at opposition of Israel, considering that Israel has its own interests in the region. Turkey also has its own as well. And if the Turks allow Israel to do what they need to do to protect their interests, this makes it look like Turkey isn't a strong defender of the other Islamic countries. And for this reason, these Islamic countries may not be compelled to become their economic partner. So this automatically puts Turkey at odds with Israel, particularly in the instance of Syria, because the HTS, which is currently in control of the Republic of Syria, is Turkish-backed, or it was historically Turkish-backed throughout its entire formation and evolution. So if they do not protect them, it starts showing a signal to other countries like Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia possibly that Turkey might not really be there to protect them if things hit the fan in some way, shape, or form for them, hypothetically, in the future. So Turkey is currently in there attempting to support, bolster, and back the HTS Jolani-led government, so that way they will be able to make a better sales pitch to other countries that you should have greater economic dealings with us, because in turn for your economic cooperation with Turkey, we will be providing some sort of a military umbrella, either against Israel or against any other country that may be hostile to any of these smaller countries' interests in the future. So it's pretty much trying to create a good pitch for an insurance program where you pay into it by having economic trade relations with Turkey, and they'll protect you militarily outside of it being on a U.S.-led framework, which is generally the prevailing one that currently exists in the region. So that's kind of what's been going on so far, and that's why Turkey's been involved in Syria to a degree. But of course, being an American, I don't really give a shit what the Turks want to do. It is inherently going against American and Western interests, largely a lot of what their activities are up to currently inside the Middle East, and I would say as the U.S., I would be putting a lot more pressure on them to cease those activities and stop attempting to encroach on what is clearly an American-led region of the world. Because we have our own security coalition in the area, and we have our own economic cooperations with these countries, and Turkey is inherently starting to erode the very foundations that the American Security Pact exists off of in this area. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, because that's really the whole lay of the land there. And a lot of people always get invested in these stories, like like people will be like, "Oh, I really see where the Turks are coming from," and it's like, but we're not Turks, we're Americans. So it's like we have to look at it from what's good for us, not for them, because
But it
what's
is
Hmm?
But it is a bit of a dilemma though, because with Turkey being in NATO, it's like we have a connection to them more so than other countries. Although to a limited degree, because of course Hungary is also in NATO, I believe as well, right?
Yeah, it's in NATO.
Yeah, they're in NATO as well, and we don't really like fully align with them. But with them being in NATO, it's a strange dilemma because we strongly support Israel as the United States, but at the same time we have a duty to sort of uphold our NATO partners as well, and Turkey being one of them. I always just found it kind of weird that Turkey is in NATO. It seems like they kind of run contrary to pretty much what NATO stands for at this point.
Man, for the longest time they didn't, until like the past 15 years. Like for all of their history, they actually were pretty much just the France of the Near East. And then they turned into this. And it's like it's just a ridiculous thing these days what they've turned into, because they don't resemble the Turkey of the past in any way. They're a totally different country than the one we brought into NATO in 19 I think it was 1949.
Is it because of what's his name that's in charge? What's the guy in
Erdogan.
charge? Is it because of Erdogan, or was it leading up to this situation?
There was a major political shift that happened in Turkey. Erdogan's like the whole crux of it, really like the face of it. There was a major political shift that happened in Turkey because of the rapid urbanization that happened in the 70s and the 80s that brought a lot of the rural people into the cities, and it completely threw off the voting base, largely from who largely ran the country, which were the urban centers like Istanbul and Ankara and Bursa and Izmir and Antalya, and then it moved it on into being more so aligned with the conservative Islamic values that really Turkey had never run off of the entire time that it existed. Turkey is supposed to be militantly secular, much like France, at least on a governmental level. But because of that massive urbanization that happened in the 70s and the 80s, that brought in a lot of these rural people who had different beliefs and really never had actually been a part of the political scene up until that point, they started to elect people that would represent their interests instead. And that's how the rise of Erdogan happened. And that's how he's pretty much changed Turkey over the past 15 years, really the past 20 years, but really the 15 years in turbo mode, into something that doesn't even resemble the Republic of Turkey from any other point over the past 100 years.
That's a shame too. It seems like when any country starts trying to intertangle like a strong religious base into the government, and once again, I obviously I'm don't go around advertising this because I don't want to like make people feel like I'm trying to be superior or something. But I'm obviously a Christian, but at the same time, I personally wouldn't advocate for like Christianity to take over the U.S. government. I see a huge benefit in keeping church and state separate, and any country around the world that seems to intertwine the religion of choice with the government always seems to go extreme one way or the other, and things start having really bad problems because of that. Because of course you have different religions in your country, and when you start trying to tell the state that we're going to run things by religion, it starts creating conflict and strife, and it starts going really sideways. And the Middle East is like a humongous case study of that.
Yeah, it really is. Also, I saw Peter Chanel say even the Ottoman Empire was not an Islamist empire. They were the Islamist empire because they actually the Ottoman Empire was actually the religious leader of the Islamic faith. They were the center of the Islamic world. And when the when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, it actually led to the collapse of the Islamic Caliphate, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard that buzzword, the Caliphate, a lot. But the Caliphate was their version of pretty much the Catholic Church in the Islamic faith, and with it there was pretty much their version of the Pope, which I believe was the Sultan, who was also the leader of the Ottoman Empire and the religious leader simultaneously. But once that collapsed, it like created an identity crisis throughout the entirety of the Islamic world, because it's like, what are we? Because there's no official guidance coming from anything like a pope anymore, which is what they used to have. And that's why you'll see that a lot of these radical Islamic faiths, at some basic core, they're saying that they want to recreate a caliphate somewhere, and it's because they're trying to create some sort of a centralized Islamic leadership like there was under the Ottoman Empire. So a little bit interesting with that. Like, of course, I'm not here to say whether I like or dislike Islamism. Like, that's where I'm just speaking more about the history and the politics of it, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to start grandstanding on that whole deal. But that's actually how that worked back in the past. But still, the Ottoman Empire had a lot of religious tolerance built into it, historically for the time. There was still a decent amount of discrimination by today's standards against non-Muslims, but still, historically for their era, for most of their history, they were actually a lot more religiously tolerant than other countries would be. For example, they allowed the Jews to start buying land in modern-day Tel Aviv in the 1880s, which most other people would never expect for an Islamic country to allow Jewish people to buy land in their country, ever. Like, that's just something that you would never see in an Islamic state of today. And back then, you would not really, like in the modern day, you wouldn't really expect Christians to live in an Islamic state like Iran. But during the times of the Ottoman Empire, there was actually a decent amount of Christians that were wandering around living in there. But then that also kind of skirts over the fact that the Ottoman Empire also had a very lively slave trade, literally until the end of their existence, where they would... Their slavery was a little bit different than other slaveries that existed in that era of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, which they were some of the last to really have it in a major scale for a major country like that. Because when a lot of people think of slavery, they think of kind of like a mercantilist form of slavery, like would have existed here in the southern United States, where slaves exist to fulfill tasks and work to make profits. Slavery in the Ottoman Empire really filled any kind of a role. And as I think some of y'all can kind of get the idea of the kind of slavery I'm trying to get at, it's literally the exact same type that Epstein was into. That was a pretty common thing. And there's a whole bunch of history that we could go into here that really isn't covered much in the mainstream. But there were these people that lived in North Africa called the Berber Pirates, and they would travel around and they would conduct kidnappings really a lot in the Mediterranean, really anywhere in Europe, of people from across Europe in the millions over the course of centuries. Actually, I believe it was in the tens of millions over the course of centuries. And they would actually ship most of them into the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire was largely their largest purchaser of these slaves. They would turn the males into eunuchs, meaning that they would castrate them, and the women, you know, they were not living great lives from that point on. Brothels were a very common thing for a lot of them, and also there was private ownership of them as well. For, of course, everyone can kind of read in between the lines here. It was a pretty nasty thing. Slavery existed across the world really up until the end of the 19th century. That's when a lot of countries started to, I would say, evolve from the sins of pretty much all time, because slavery existed through pretty much every culture in history for thousands of years, and we finally started to see the mass outlawing of slavery, but the Ottoman Empire allowed it quite literally until they collapsed in 1918. So a little bit of an interesting side note with that whole deal. Anyways,
and then China found out all they have to do is simply pay basically little to no wages, what they call a slave wage, and work people to the bone. And then you have, like, technically not slavery, but also slavery at the same time.
Yeah, and then the Soviet Union found that out too. They found out that they could confiscate all the farmers' lands and then force them to work it like slaves nearly, but say that it was in the name of Soviet liberation, or communist liberation. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed all that well. Kind of a little bit of an interesting story on all that. You know, it's a little bit of an interesting. People don't know a lot about that kind of a side of things because it's not really talked about a lot. But the world's a very gray area kind of a thing when you really start to read up about it. A lot of people always think that things are very black and white in our modern day of what's right and wrong, but back then there was a lot of gray area, very much so a lot of gray area, at least for the people of the time. Not at all the same kind of moral system we live on, even just 150 years later. Anyways, with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream, and I gotta thank you all so much once again for watching. All 10.1 thousand of y'all who were here at the peak tonight, and not only that, the 71,000 people who've watched since this stream began. We are entirely honored and appreciative to have all of y'all here tonight, and not only that, we thank you all so much for helping to raise $3.5 thousand in support of revived soldiers of Ukraine. An absolutely amazing figure to reach. And of course, it's time for us to get off air and try and get some food to eat. But nevertheless, I thank you all so much once again for watching. And we will, I will probably see y'all tomorrow if there's enough news to make a short war video. But if we do not make a short war video, we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and Heram Slava.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight, and all 72,000 people that have been here by the end of the stream. And also, huge shout out to the LSA once again for, of course, helping us to smash that fundraiser goal well above it, almost 1,000 above. And a huge thanks to you all for making that possible. And also, the Enforcer will be joining you all midday tomorrow, like you said, for the short warp video if there isn't enough news to cover. And I have a feeling that there probably will be. So we'll probably be putting that video out tomorrow for you all to watch midday on the Monday. But with that, we'll see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.
on me strong.